Today's guest is Arnold Stillman. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet you.
So I have a few news events, some stuff I wanted to talk about. So if you hadn't heard, actually the news, I just heard this today, Bittrex.com, B-I-T-T-R-E-X, which is an exchange, is suspending New York trading as of today. The good news is you have till June 9th to withdraw your Bitcoin, and the bad news is if you don't, you're going to lose it. So apparently this is just for New York. They're not having financial difficulties, they're just having difficulties with New York's financial structure. So especially since we're in New York, and I know a lot of the viewers are, if you have coins in there, it might be time to get them off. And of course, we have Assange in the news today. So at some point, maybe we'll talk a little bit about blockchain.
And the WikiLeaks.
And the WikiLeaks. Sure, we can talk about WikiLeaks too. Right. The reason I bring that up in the context of blockchain is I'm kind of curious. I think today's WikiLeaks would not be running on a single server or even a distributed Web 2.0 kind of server infrastructure. I think it probably would be running on blockchain.
Or they can make their own chain.
Right, which would eliminate this problem where you have the Assange.
Right.
Yeah, well, of course it would be their own chain, right? They wouldn't try to put it on, monetize it in thousands of dollars per article.
We don't know. It could be.
Yeah, I mean, there may be some mix, right? I mean, currency is not necessarily coinage, so.
Right.
And I just wanted to say thanks a lot for the jump cut. Not this past episode, but the one before. You recommended Love, Death, and Robots. That was awesome. So if you're into sci-fi shorts, definitely worth your time, and check out the jump cut because they got good recommends. All right, so let's get into it. I don't know if you want to start with what I was talking about with the blockchain or Assange or...
Well, I only mentioned the blockchain because I'm giving a talk on Bitcoin and blockchain creation for the IEEE. I'm a senior member of the IEEE, the Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, and I'm on the executive committee here on Long Island.
You're on the executive committee in Long Island. That's great.
That's a real big deal.
I know a lot of guys
I got a plaque like about this big.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they asked me to give a talk on blockchains and cryptocurrencies, and so I had originally written a short little example blockchain for our own use. One of the uses that people are looking at in implementing blockchain is to do Internet of Things nodes.
Right.
Now the problem with the node is that it has a small memory footprint.
Right.
So you can't download the full ledger onto the node. You have to have some sort of little server that acts as the ledger repository.
Right.
So IBM patented an idea on how to use nodes as part of the end point of a blockchain.
Hyperledger?
But the idea was a little bit backwards, and so I started to think about it, and then I got asked to do this talk. And part of the talk involved getting back to your original discussion about what could be hidden in the blockchain with respect to WikiLeaks. It turns out that when you submit, payment in Bitcoin to the blockchain, you have an address, you have your own address, and for those viewers out here, this is the address here turned into an ASCII code down here.
Oh yeah, it's a Technocrat Live's address. Thanks for that, I appreciate it.
So the point is that this ASCII code translates into nothing in particular, it's just nonsense.
Right.
But you can reverse the procedure, and you can put in something like, hi, this is your friendly robot talking to you, turn that into an address, that address then can actually receive and pay in Bitcoins. And if you're willing to, say, pay that address, say, 1,000th of a Bitcoin, $5, then that address will be put onto the blockchain, and everybody can see it, and then you can decode it if you happen to know that it's been coded.
So wait a minute. So I mean, the whole reason that Bitcoin works is because of asymmetric. Because of the asymmetric nature of the encryption algorithms.
Correct.
So if you're trying to come at it from, okay, here's the final result I want in hex, for an address, isn't that going to be extremely costly? I mean, prohibitively costly to turn around and reverse that back into an address?
It's not costly to reverse it back.
Or you're just hitting it until you find one that matches.
No, you can't do that. That's impossible.
Right.
What you do is you have to then do this base 58B code scheme, which basically takes the hex address and turns it into an address. The thing that you're talking about, the actual transaction itself, that's the one that can't be reversed and altered.
Oh, okay.
But
so
the address,
you're talking about the wallet, you're talking about the
right.
address. Okay,
right.
Of course.
In other words, the mailbox that you receive money in, I could scratch out 142 Main Street and make it to 141 Main Street.
Right. So if you're new to Bitcoin, let me give them 30 seconds because we have a mixed audience.
Right.
So well, actually, would you care to explain the basics of Bitcoin and how it works, or?
Sure. So first of all, the Bitcoin itself and blockchains are two separate entities. Bitcoin uses a blockchain in order to secure transactions.
And it was kind of the reference model was the first one.
That's correct.
Yes.
Based on an early implementation called Hashcash, which was written by a bunch of programmers as an experiment. And then
I remember that.
Right. So what happens is in a blockchain you have this distributed ledger. The nodes all around the world take this latest bunch of transactions. They put it all together in a block, and then the first one that's able to encrypt the block correctly wins some bitcoins.
Right.
Now, and that's how bitcoins are created. Transactions of bitcoins
which are being created less and less frequently these days. So that's important. It's not a static thing where it's always new bitcoins being churned out. The difficulty rate defines how fast the bitcoins are made.
Right.
So they're actually becoming more scarce over time,
right.
Which is generally how most blockchains work.
Right. The original algorithm called for two Bitcoin created every 10 minutes, and that means that as more computing power gets online to try and mine these bitcoins doing this encryption algorithms, the faster they will find the next bitcoin. So of course then the difficulty goes up and it slows down. So the rate of mining actually fluctuates up and down. 10 minutes was originally proposed by the apocryphal Satoshi Nakamoto because he or she wanted time, or them, wanted time for all the nodes to synchronize. So if one node got ahead of everybody else in milliseconds, of course, then nothing works. Right. So the nodes all have to synchronize, and the ledgers, everybody around the world says, okay, ledger is now at this point, and it's all okay. Meanwhile, new transactions are being generated and wrapped up into blocks all the time, and they all get pushed out onto the network, and then the nodes start going again, trying to encode them.
Right.
And so that's essentially the way it works. But then,
and then once they're verified, they're on the blockchain. Once they're verified,
they can't be changed.
And it can't be changed. It's immutable.
It's mutable, and
it's immutable,
right.
And actually, well, we can talk about it later, but one of the problems with that is the possibility of poison cache. But if the payload's small, that becomes a poison well.
Right.
But if the payload's small enough, that's not a risk.
So
we'll come. I think we're going to come back to it because we're doing this with Internet of Things.
Right, right. There are many, all sorts of technical details involved in this stuff, and there are a lot of skilled programmers that are involved in sort of shepherding the protocol along. But one of the things about the blockchain itself, not Bitcoin, but the blockchain itself, is that anything can be a transaction. It can be a deed, it can be a picture, it can be a bunch of bitcoins, it can be anything that can be represented as a digital word.
Right.
And that is a problem because nobody knows who the transactor is, and nobody knows what the transaction is until they pull it out. So anything from a contract to commit a murder to a contract to sell a kilo of heroin or whatever can be put into the Bitcoin, to the blockchain ledger.
Let's do something good in there.
Or as there's a very good blog by Ken Sheriff that points out, there's a picture of Nelson Mandela.
Right.
There's a bunch of prayers. There's a bunch of other stuff. There's the Bitcoin logo. And that was the reaction from some other guys.
I'm sure.
Right. So
there's always one.
Right. No, there were many. Right. But so now we're going to be a little bit at odds here because before the show you point out that you were more of a libertarian. I'm not a libertarian.
Oh no, I'm an independent, and I am all over the map.
Right. But the point is that all of these ideas, peer-to-peer transactions that were anonymous, are a libertarian ideal.
Right.
But really, it's a prescription for the Silk Road. Right. It's a way to buy drugs, buy murders, buy prostitutes.
Right.
And
I have transacted a lot of Bitcoin, and I haven't done any of those things.
But you could if you wanted to.
Yes,
and that's
really
the point, right? And I think that
I would prefer American dollars for that.
Right, and
because that's what. In fairness, on the global scheme, this is important because it's important to me. I think it's even if it isn't Bitcoin, if a cryptocurrency doesn't succeed, it's the base case. Blockchain is done.
Right.
You know, it doesn't have to be the biggest, most important part of blockchain, but if it completely fails, blockchains will fail too.
Right.
So, and it's not always criminal use. And actually, I just paid my taxes. The IRS loves me right now, and I'm playing by the rules. But you know, not everyone is, and that's up to each individual to choose a good or a bad path.
Look, well, sure, but ultimately, the actual implementation of Bitcoin to do financial transactions will probably eventually work because the nefarious uses, there are fewer players doing that if the popularity of transactions of Bitcoin increases. And eventually they get weeded out. You know, the law enforcement has ways of tracking this out.
Yes, and they're building huge clusters as we speak to do this. Yes.
So, you know, so ultimately that washes out. Right. So the fact that it's a playground for people doing all sorts of crazy stuff by hiding things in their addresses, which steganography is, as you know, is what it's called, basically hiding images in plain sight digitally.
Right.
So once all that washes away, then Bitcoin will probably become a useful currency. But right now, it's really just a speculator's tool. People are hoping that the value will go up, so they buy it.
So I completely disagree with you in that, although I agree with you in New York and in the United States. Because of the taxes, it's just not practical to keep track of your transactions. I am using it as a speculative currency.
Right.
But I had been beginning to use it as a normal currency until they said, it is not a currency, it's a commodity, and then tax it as such.
Right.
And I mean, my accountant already hates me just coming in and talking about the ins and the outs and the trades, you know, using it as a trading vehicle. So, I mean, you know, this is a civic decision. This wasn't.
Yes, right. But the blockchain technology that underlies it is another thing altogether. And if you were to somehow create a protocol that only allows the types of transactions that you wish to be on the blockchain.
Right.
In other words, is this a picture of Nelson Mandela? Yes? Okay, you're out of here. Right?
Yeah.
We don't
like that guy.
Right.
Yeah.
No, or
really,
whatever.
Nelson Mandela's fine.
Right. Or if this is something from, you know, the hymnal that people have posted. Right. Prayers, no, we don't want them. We just want transactions that are this type of thing.
Right.
And that's where, so an IBM has a blockchain which is vertically oriented, and this is where I was going to comment on IBM's implementation of this. It is actually against the spirit of blockchain technology itself because it's vertically integrated. There are not a whole bunch of nodes mining these blocks. It's just one straight, basically, chain of custody, which is, you can do it in other ways. There's no reason for a blockchain to do that.
Well, custody is the problem I think society's trying to solve right now.
Right.
And I think, and in a lot of ways, people are like, oh, this is a problem. Blockchain and Bitcoin and any other cryptocurrencies are a problem looking for a solution. No, if anything, if you pay careful attention to the news, you're constantly seeing custody problems. Everybody's arguing about what's a lie and what's the truth. That's the problem we really need to solve as a civilization.
Right, but the implementation of that is that you need a worldwide network of nodes that verify those transactions. Now, IBM's idea was a vertically integrated set of servers that, of course, there were no worldwide nodes available to do that. But meanwhile, that IBM blockchain that you see advertised on TV, that is a vertically integrated anti sort of anonymous bunch of nodes system. It's not really the way it was implemented originally. But how did I get involved in this? Well, so this talk that I was giving touches on all that stuff. But originally it was because we actually make a device, and it's sitting over here, that monitors oil tanks.
Right. So wait, I have two things I want to tell you that tie this into that.
Yeah.
So first of all, I want to know if you're spying on our user group meetings, because we've also been talking about using blockchain as an Internet of Things solution. And I am the Internet of Things poor security model hater guy, so I didn't even know this about when you came on the show. So please tell me all about your technology and how you guys solve the security problems of the Internet of Things.
Well, first of all, we're not spying on you, and second of all, if we were spying on you, I'd give you the same answer.
Yes. So, I'm just kidding. I remember you.
We make a internet-connected tank reader which monitors oil tanks for oil delivery services, and some residential users have bought individual ones off the internet. But we use a simple, basic, simple model of it's a HTTPS encrypted transaction from our device up to the cloud.
Okay.
But the other advantage that we have is that nobody really cares to snag the data of how much oil is in an oil tank.
Right.
And that is all that we send up. And so our security model is we don't have any valuable data, and even if you did try to sneak in through our encrypted, through hacking the encryption, you're not going to find out much of anything.
Right. Well, so is it a a ROM on the system on the chip?
It's not a ROM, but what happens is there are two types of chip. We use either the Wi-Fi radios or we use cellular radios, and they only do HTTP posts from the device. You cannot access the device from outside.
They're hardware blocked for HTTP.
Right. It only sends device to our Azure cloud. It does not receive any data from outside, so you can't hack your way in.
No, there's literally no way in.
There's no way in.
Okay.
No. Well, there is if you had a screwdriver and a RS-232 cables, and you plug that.
Right. Well, physical access. So if you're not a computer security wonk, physical access is a deal breaker on any.
Let me explain physical access to oil tank readers.
Right.
Most of these oil tanks, especially ones in New York City in apartment buildings, they're in the basement. They're either covered with roaches or they're covered with rat droppings.
Right.
So physical access, I don't care who you are, nobody really wants to do that.
Right. So what I was thinking of, but of course this is completely moot because what you said is that there's a blockade where no incoming connections are accepted whatsoever.
Right.
Which I've heard of. There's lots of Internet of Things devices, and this is what I was talking about, where that's not the case, where there are at least limited cases where incoming connections are accepted.
Right.
And if that's true, I was concerned that it could literally be used to incinerate a house or something like that.
Well, right. Certain devices, like we also make this device
I'm
here.
sure people are thinking that too, so it'd be good to clear that up.
Well, we also make a cell phone connected device that's standalone. It's the heart of one of our tank readers. This is the cell phone connection, and this has got a cellular modem on there. Most cellular modems have a feature called firmware upgrade over the air. So you can upgrade the firmware from a central server by pushing it out to the modem. We don't allow that.
Right.
So the point is, if an oil tank reader is working, and it's working well, what kind of firmware upgrade do you need?
And
there's no other feature that you want to put on there.
And you cannot allow that because you designed the board.
Right. We designed the board, and we designed
it's literally not the circuit to make the connection.
Right. Well, we designed the software that makes this thing operate, and so we don't allow the firmware over the air upgrades.
Okay.
But and it's a standard feature of all cell phone connected devices.
That's the trick on the telematic systems in people's cars, that you call up and you say, I'm not interested in the service, and they send a signal to a perfectly functional two-way connection, and they shut an LED off, and you're supposed to feel comfortable with it then.
Well, right, and there's also
I know better.
There's also the video of the guy that was watching his Tesla being upgraded while he was driving.
I didn't see that.
Yeah,
one.
There's a video of that, and that's it's a little bit scary. I mean, what if a thing didn't work?
A little scary.
Right.
Yeah. It's all drive-by-wire. You can put your feet out and do Flintstone if you're trying to stop it then.
That's right. So it's a little bit of a problem, but we avoid that. We don't allow talking to the devices because it's a simple data model. It's how much oil is in your tank, send it up to our web server, and show it on the display.
Thank you so much for clearing that up. I was a little nervous that I didn't know this before the show, and I was a little nervous I was being irresponsible, but I feel much better now.
Right. Well, but you should be aware that almost all internet connected devices do have that feature.
Yes.
They're all, when your computer screen shows up and says installing updates, I mean, that's what it's doing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So. Yeah, I mean, I have a computer science degree. I was a sysadmin for 20 years by trade, so that is my business. I was usually, in at least a couple of my jobs, I was the patch guy. I was the one who was not only staging and testing patches to make sure they wouldn't blow the servers up when we deployed them, but making sure when there was a zero-day exploit that came out, we got to go. And I know that the piles and piles of devices out there are running Linux underneath, and they have exactly the same exploits. But if there's a hardware limited connection coming in, that is definitely an ideal way to solve that problem.
Right.
And if you can't get in, you can't get in. Period.
Right. But in the early days, it was really wide open. I'll tell you how I got to become a Linux user myself, and how we ended up meeting each other 10, 15 years ago at Linux user group meetings. I used to work at Brookhaven National Laboratory, and I was designing instrumentation for one of the accelerators there. And around that time, time Linux had just become popular, and the kernel was like 0.9 something or other.
Right. I think you're actually ahead of me. So I think I wasn't quite into it yet at that point. I think I was one something.
Right. So I snagged an old, probably 386 computer, and I loaded up a version of Linux on it that seemed to work. And then everything in the control room at Brookhaven was run on the X Windows system, which used fancy Apollo workstations and all this other stuff. But then again, X came native on the Linux distributions, and I was able to control my device from my desk rather than going into the control room.
Right.
So I then said, wait a second, if I can control my device, I could probably control the rest of the accelerator as well.
Right.
So I logged into basically the accelerator controls system, of which my device was a small part.
I worked at B&L too. Cybersecurity must have loved you. There was no cyber back then. Okay.
No, but the point is that it was an open system on X Windows,
right.
and all of a sudden now, but very quickly, things turned around, and I think now probably the control rooms are all Linux servers running, and Apollo is out of business.
So they were. So the B&L has got the unique distinction of being the only Department of Energy that's facility that's not also a DoD facility. They have DoD operations, but it's not a DoD facility.
Right.
So they have this weird dichotomy of scientists wanting to run amok, and then the government wanting to protect nuclear secrets, which actually aren't there, except for the reactor, which has been since shut down.
Decommissioned, right.
Decommissioned.
Right.
So, it's a little chaotic, their policies. So I could understand how not only someone could set that up like that,
right.
and how you would run into it. And I assume you called IT or you took care of it yourself and contacted the scientists and said, this is broken.
They found out. No, they found out.
Okay.
I said, hey, look, I can control the magnets from my desktop.
So you're a hacker. All right, cool.
That was way back. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah, well, whatever.
So
it's all fun if you're not malicious and you don't actually do any damage and you just find something.
Well, I went to the controls group and I said, hey, look, I can do this, and then they basically had a look of horror on their face.
dumpster dove patient data once.
Right.
That wasn't my screw up. That was theirs. Yeah. So it happens.
Right. Right. So it's it was, so that's how I got involved with it. But now look, the company that we have now, it's all run on Microsoft products. So it's
right.
Our CTO used to work at Microsoft, so he enjoys the familiarity, I think, of
Hey, whatever. If it works, I mean, Microsoft's becoming more Linuxy every day anyway.
Oh, so. Yeah, I think the source is now available, right?
Well, I don't think the source is available for some pieces, but a lot of the Linux and the Unixy tools
right.
are available, and they're following the model where everything's being broken down to smaller and smaller pieces, and you can do everything from the command line.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you want to treat it like an OS X box or like a Linux box, you can.
So here's a funny story. I broke our server just yesterday.
Well, don't do that.
Well, yeah, I didn't know what I was doing. So, so the days of my hacking into stuff are gone. But yeah, I had no idea what I had done wrong or what switch I had flipped or whatever, and we were down for, I don't know, maybe 12 hours.
Wow. Is this your web server or was it a public server of some sort?
It's not that. It's not the Poem Technology web server, so you could still buy our stuff. No, it's the server that puts this data out.
Oh, that data.
Right, the actual user data.
Oh, okay, got it.
So the graphs and the devices and all that stuff, they were offline. Oh. They were still working.
So what did it turn out you did? Do you know, or does nobody know? Was it the three-finger salute solution?
No. It was one of the app service administrative tools.
Okay.
And I must have turned it off without realizing.
Okay.
And so the part of the app service disappeared.
So when I would patch systems, one of the things I would do is I would dump the entire process table. So I know. Come on. Why is my thing down? Your thing wasn't running before, because sometimes people didn't know.
Right.
Right. So, all right. So,
how did I get involved in that? That's an interesting story. That's
not what I was going to ask, but go ahead.
It's not that interesting. I had, after I left B&L, I bounced around a couple of places, one military supplier and one company that does MTA software on Long Island, Clever Devices.
Uh-huh.
And then they didn't believe the solution that I gave them for something that they were trying to do, so then they let me go. And then I decided to go out on my own trying to do stuff. And then we have a patent on a current sensor, it's a novel kind of current sensor. So I was showing that off at a conference at Farmingdale, IEEE conference at Farmingdale. And an oil delivery service salesman came walking by, and we were talking, and he said he was interested in tank monitoring, not current monitoring. So I said, well, I'll make you one if you want, but why do you want me to make one? There must be thousands of companies that sell these things. And so he said, yeah, but they're all too expensive. I want one that's I can give as a corporate giveaway. So I said, if you commit to like 1,000 devices, I'll give you a prototype in a month or two. So he said, well, we have 6,000 tanks. And so he had his prototype, and then they filed for Chapter 11.
Oh, man.
So then...
well, go to business, kid.
A couple of years down the road, we now actually have customers, and so we're still hanging on, and we've branched out from the Wi-Fi device that I originally had developed for him onto our cell phone-based device.
Right.
And the advantage there is that for oil delivery installers, if you're going to install this on a residential oil tank, you're going to have to ask for the router password, and most of the time people know it. A lot of times they don't know it, and many times it's the wrong person, the grandmother or the kid or whatever, and they don't know you. They don't even know what you're talking about.
Right.
So access is a problem.
This is actually on my list of things of getting. How the heck do you get out of the consumer's network?
That's right. So the cell phone device, once it's installed, the technician pushes the button, the device turns on, connects to the tower, sends a reading, goes to sleep for a day, wakes up the next day, sends a reading, goes to sleep for a day. Right. And so there's no customer involvement at all other than access to the tank.
Right. So are you concerned that the cell phone network that you're using is going to become grandfathered out and then you're not going to have access to it anymore?
That's a very good question, because this guy is a 3G network device. 3G is going to disappear maybe in 10 years. They say 5, but nobody, even 2G is still around.
Yeah.
So
they haven't even started 5G. Come on.
Right. So this guy's going to disappear, but the IoT networks are now starting to take hold, and we have at our printed circuit board house right now 2 of the IoT network modems that are ready for us to test. Right. And so it's a little bit future-proof in that sense.
So actually, I just had a pretty good technical discussion with some investors talking about S-curves. I think talking about with S-curves and the technology curve, how it tends to taper off as you get towards the end of a technology. I think the 5G is the top of the S-curve, and that we're done. And if that's the case, I could see 3G never getting phased out. I saw, not to be too optimistic.
I saw a white paper on 6G.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so you think I'm wrong? You think they're not done?
It's either that or it's just vaporware. PR people writing.
It's never been any vaporware in the history of tech.
Right. So so anyway, but 5G, again, 5G doesn't really impact us, because what's going to happen is for 5G networks,
eventually they might dust you. They might leave you.
But what's going to happen is
ripping down cell towers.
No, what's going to happen is there's going to be a demand for low data rate networks and high data rate networks, and nothing in between.
I completely agree with you. Yes,
and
that's probably going to.
So these guys are living in the low.
It'll be the 3G network will be entirely doodads.
That's why the Cat 1 and Cat NB networks were created. They're just channels on LTE that were created for low data rates.
Okay.
And so the multiple antenna networks and all that other stuff is going to go for the streaming video and for people that want to make maps as they're walking down the street and that kind of thing.
Right.
So it's that's a little bit of a different story altogether. I don't think it would affect us, but who knows? So really, your customers are. It sounds like your customers are, or at least your first customer was the actual oil tank installers and service contractors. I should say. Right. The fuel oil delivery services. Right. Yeah. And then some people thought it was a good idea, so we started selling a few on the internet to individuals as well. I guess that's a huge advantage of working in the oil business, because it's a lot more shade tree and a lot more local, and you have local companies where you can work directly with them or with customers, as opposed to like gas, which is a utility, and you have to do your first order is $1 million, and if you can't do $1 million, they don't want to talk to you. Right. And gas is a little bit different too, because it's different. It's a gas. It's not a liquid, and it'll blow up if you have the slightest. No, but the metering technology is standardized. It's standardized and approved. Okay. Right. Whereas there is no approval for an oil tank. I was going to ask that. So there's no UL approval process or anything like that? Much to everyone's surprise, fuel oil is not flammable.
Right. No, it's only under compression.
Right, it has to be vaporized in the burner.
They have to. So if you didn't know this, it's kind of an interesting thing. Technically, the fuel oil in your house is like very similar to diesel fuel.
Right.
And actually, the government was having problems with people chintzing out on taxes using home heating oil in their diesel trucks and cars. So they started adding red dye so that it would become obvious if you were using unapproved oil.
If you look at the delivery ticket, actually, the delivery ticket says dyed red number 2.
Oh, it does?
Yes.
Okay, I never actually looked at that, but okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So right, that's what you actually get delivered to your house, and but you know it's a little bit different business because of the the nature of the delivery system, trucks versus pipelines, and so you need the approvals for gas, but you don't need them for oil.
Right, right. So how many are you planning on making of these devices?
Well, supposedly.
Well, how many do you have of these, first of all?
We have about 1,000 of these in the production line, and about half are dedicated to our devices, but then we sell these individually as well to hackers and do-it-yourselfers.
Okay. How about competitors? Not sure yet, or?
Plenty.
Plenty? Okay.
Plenty of competitors.
Okay. No, I mean, do you sell it to competitors?
Oh, we would. I'm sure we would.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
Except
I mean,
our competitors.
That question will only be important to one person, but it might be important. So.
Yeah. We would sell it to competitors, I suppose, but I don't think they would actually use it because the cell phone systems that they're using, I think we're ahead of them in deployments, but the cell phone system they're probably using different modems. The U-Blox modem that we use is not particularly inexpensive. It's not particularly expensive, but it's not the cheapest.
Well, I mean, I want to promote anything since it's, you've essentially software locked the thing so that it can't have any incoming traffic. Any kind of Internet of Things device that's even vaguely safe. I mean, they tried to sell me a boiler for my house that had Wi-Fi on it. And I actually had to get a cheaper model that I didn't want, because it was the only way I could get it without Wi-Fi. And it's insane to me to have a Wi-Fi because somebody could war drive by my house and burn my house down if they have an exploit or a crack against it. So
that's right. The original.
So I would love to see that in more in circulation and be in more devices aside from your product.
Right, but again, somebody that's actually going to program the device. Technically, there are 2 processors on here. One that controls the modem. The other one controls the type of program that you want to run.
Right.
And you actually could make it so that it did accept incoming calls if you wanted to. But that's a developer issue. So it's not we don't do that, but somebody else could do that. But right out of the box, it comes with some code that you can play with. And I mean, you can light lights. You could actually make a cell phone call. You could use it. I tell people not to do that, but you could make a robodialer, for instance, using the cloud service that the cloud service that we provide. We provide a SIM from Hologram, who's the company that originally made this module.
Right.
They don't make it anymore, so we make it because we bought 1,000 of them. So using their SIM card, you can connect to their servers and do whatever you want with it.
Right.
So that's.
Do you think maybe you'll be doing more Internet of Things devices, or what else do you have in the pike? Let's say this is a wild success and you could offshore it. What would be next?
The rest of the company will kill me for saying this, but I was thinking about CO2 sensors and air monitoring systems.
That's okay. We're just shooting the breeze here, man.
Because you
have to come through me first. You can't kill them.
Yeah. I ran across this university website in which they had built an air quality sensor, and they sold out immediately because people were interested in them.
Oh, okay.
And it was a relatively simple device. And CO2 monitoring stands to become a more important concern in the future. Global warming is caused mainly by CO2, excess CO2 in the atmosphere, human-generated CO2. And the monitoring effort is generally done with fairly expensive, on the order of $500 to $1,000 sensors. And now this guy and a $10 sensor, you have a $150 box.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'd be very curious if they wouldn't if they wouldn't be interested in that.
I'm sure there is. Again, we're talking.
You're hypothetical, right? Yeah,
I was looking at this yesterday, right? So it hasn't gotten a lot of thought yet.
Sometimes there's externalities. Like I remember there was an issue where people were complaining about talking about climate sensors globally.
Right.
There was people were complaining that one climate sensor or weather sensor was completely wrong on a regular basis. It was anywhere between 3 and 5 degrees above what the temperature was of the other surrounding sensors. And a lot of people were like, fix.
Right.
Turns out what had happened is, and this is pretty dumb, they had mounted the sensor on the wall on the outside of a building next to a parking spot that was almost always occupied, sometimes with running vehicles, which would blast it with hot air and raise the mean temperature.
So the sensor was right.
Yeah, the sensor was right. The person who installed it was wrong.
Right. or the analysis was wrong.
Yeah.
You can sort of combine that with some modern mapping, and I think a lot of those problems go away.
Right.
But that's that's an important concern now, and I had actually asked somebody at Brookhaven about this a long time ago, an atmospheric scientist, and I said, why can't you just monitor CO2 via satellite? He said, well, CO2 disperses very rapidly, so all you see from a satellite is a blanket of CO2. You don't see the sources.
Okay.
Right. So with these small sensors all over the place, you could actually locate the sources.
Well, it would be every single animal, every single factory, every single vehicle,
But you could do it at a finer mesh than the satellite would see.
Yeah.
Rather than 100 square miles, you could do it at you could put it on every 10th building in New York City, for instance.
Okay. Right. Yeah, an urban setting might be a good place to pick that up.
That's right. Anyway, so that was, but part of that is because I'm more interested in the physics of all these devices than in actually engineering them. Engineering them is just a means to create the company and do this stuff.
Right.
So
that's the whole device right there, or no? There's also got to be some kind of sensor.
Yeah, this is just the cell phone part.
Yeah, that's the cell phone part, and then there's another piece to it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it looks like this.
And at the bottom, you see that orange tube?
Yep.
There's a pressure tube that goes down to the bottom of the tank, and there's a pressure sensor inside the box.
Now, how do you know that the tube is touching the bottom of the tank?
Doesn't matter.
Installed correctly.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay.
No, you just have to know how far off the bottom it is.
Okay. So the installation must be, to be correct, it has to actually.
The tube is 10 feet long.
Right.
So the technician drops it into the tank. It goes clunk at the bottom, and then he raises it up a little bit.
And how does it actually work? Does it just measure the difference in atmospheric pressure versus the pressure of the fluid at the bottom?
It's called hydrostatic pressure. It should be called oleostatic pressure because it's oil.
Right.
But anyway, as the fluid rises, the pressure in the tube increases.
Right.
And as the fluid drops, the pressure drops. And
so simple.
Right. And we have a chart that compares the pressure.
That keeps it out of the oil so it doesn't degrade over time.
No, actually, it's in the oil.
Oh, it's completely buried. So it's oil-proof.
That tubing is fuel line tubing. It's the tubing that you might use in a race car to run the gas lines, for instance.
Yeah.
And it's fuel line tubing, and then we put a bell at the bottom, a heavy weighted bell, so the tubing hangs straight down.
And then someone doesn't need to go crawl around in someone's cockroach infested basement
only once to put the thing in.
Only once to put the thing in.
And then maybe to change the batteries if they're battery operated.
That poor guy.
Right.
Yeah. How long does the battery last?
The one you see there is AC powered. The batteries in our battery operated device, which power those cell phone devices, right now our battery test is showing over 2 years of battery life.
Right.
Which is, I have to be honest, is at the low end of our competitors' range, but I don't trust the competitors. They haven't been in business long enough to advertise a 5-year battery life.
Right.
So I don't know where they're getting that from.
Right.
I mean, I do know where they're getting it from. They're getting it from measurements.
No, I understand.
But they don't know, for instance, they don't know how far
it's like somebody who wants a Linux specialist with 30 years experience.
Right, exactly.
How's that possible?
Right, exactly. So, yeah, they don't know how far the cell tower is from the actual device.
Yeah.
So how are you going to tell, it takes more current to reach a further cell tower.
Right.
So again, it's just estimates. We could always say 5 years, but we wouldn't. It doesn't jibe with what we have in our notebooks.
Okay, great.
So
you're building 1,000, and then you're going to see, and then you're going to.
A small oil delivery service has about 5,000 tanks.
Okay.
So
you got a business for a while.
There are 9 million oil tanks in America. Almost maybe 10% of them have monitors on them, and all of them get deliveries.
The majority of Levitt homes still have oil tanks.
Yeah, all of those tanks get deliveries from somebody or other. And we have a propane monitor as well, and that's going to go on propane tanks. That market is like 3 times the size.
Really? So would you be interested in making like a propane sensor? Because you were talking about, I know this was for an environmental reason, for CO2.
The propane monitor itself reads the dial gauge on the propane tank.
Oh, okay.
There's no way to sense the propane in the tank.
That's not what I meant. Like a leak, like a CO2 sensor.
Yeah, you can make it.
Fires.
Sure.
Because I'll tell you that I just got
the same thing the guy told me. I said, look, you want 1,000? I'll make you a prototype.
Right.
But just don't go out of business.
The ones, so the RV business is fairly enormous, and they all have propane sensors, and they're fairly terrible.
And the reason why they have them is because you can't monitor those cylinders. Those are home grill cylinders.
Right.
And they don't have a gauge on them.
Right.
And the only way you can monitor the propane in there is by weighing them.
Oh, no. So I wasn't actually. So that's true. You can have a mechanical one. So that's usually what people use. But of course they stick and they don't work.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was actually talking about the anti-leak ones. The ones in the. So the problem is any kind of heavy gas that tends to sit at the floor sets them off.
Right.
So in other words, your wife goes to do her hairspray. Some of the airborne gases from the hairspray settle on the floor and it goes off. It happened to us a couple times. Of course, when does it happen? First thing in the morning or late at night? Sure. When you're getting ready to go out, and all the neighbors wake up and camping's ruined.
The only downside to making one is how many you want.
Right.
I could certainly make you one. It'll cost you about $20,000.
That sounds wonderful. When do we get started? No. I was more as a business idea for you.
Right.
I'm not. Right. I'm not going to buy your $20,000 propane sensor.
Right.
So I think there's like hundreds of thousands of RVs sold a year. So it might be a good market if you're looking.
Well, it's good. Yeah, it's worth following up. Again, my partners will kill me for bringing up new products when we're not selling the old ones.
Right. And people usually store their RVs sometimes remotely.
Right.
And that would be a place for a cell phone.
That's one of the advantages of these types of devices, and that is it's sensor agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
Our interface doesn't care what you hook up to it. It's just a matter of what Tom knows is.
Anyway, you didn't bring it up. I brought it up.
Right.
Yeah, so they can hate me. They're just not going to hire me, which is fine. I'm not really looking to get hired anyway. But I'm a free agent, man.
The singular advantage of our propane sensor is where are all propane tanks? Where are they all?
They are.
Are they inside or outside?
No, outside, of course.
Okay, so we have a solar-powered propane monitor.
Nice. So you don't have to worry about the AC problem.
Never open, never change the batteries.
Right.
It just sits there forever.
Nice.
Yeah, our prototype is on my deck right now. It's been there for weeks.
Right.
Clicking away.
Yeah. Most people don't realize that solar panels are usually warranted for 30 years, and they last much longer than that.
The no moving parts?
Yeah, no moving parts. No, there's nothing to go wrong.
What's to go wrong? Right.
Yeah. Unless you hit it with something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in fact, one interesting fact about them is that since they are dark and they absorb sunlight fairly well, I have pictures of them sitting in the snow. The panel, the whole box buried in snow except for the panel, which has gotten warm enough to melt the snow above it.
Right. Have you mentioned something about Raspberry Pi? So what are you using the Raspberry Pi for?
We use Raspberry Pis to.
By the way, do you want some wine?
Sure, thanks.
Okay. White or red?
Red, thanks.
Okay.
We use Raspberry Pis and a system called OpenOCD, which is a method for running the JTAG debugging interface on electronics. It's it's a little bit of a designer's insider tool for monitoring microprocessor debugging.
Okay, what was the name of the tool again?
OpenOCD.
OpenOCD. Okay.
Right. It has nothing to do with mental illness,
obsessive compulsive disorder. Hey, I know a great admin who is OCD.
Yeah. Well, that's good for admins, I guess.
Yeah.
Cheers. So
to happy returns.
Right. So OpenOCD runs this debugging port, but part of any debugger is the ability to load code onto your processor. And so what it does is this guy has 2 processors on it, one small one there and a bigger one there. The small one controls all the modem functions so that we don't have to do things like actually dialing or anything like that.
Right.
The large one, as I mentioned earlier, controls all the programming that you want the little device to do. So what the Raspberry Pi does is it connects to these pins on the back in a certain way, and allows us to load the code onto the bare metal processors,
right,
without using any fancy development systems.
So you just use the pinout right on the Raspberry Pi and tie directly into it.
We have 2 headers. We bring them and we
just plug it right in.
And we open up a terminal.
Is it have you hardwired something, or is it still a breadboard contraption right now?
It's 2 headers with a bunch of wires.
Okay, yeah. So you did hardwire. Okay.
Yeah. So
I can picture the tangled spaghetti mess.
I could show you the
from
picture.
the prototype.
We got the documentation from Hologram, and the documentation shows a guy who I think is named Mikey. It shows a guy holding it like this with the wires. That's the documentation. So we use OpenOCD to flash the processors on here, and then confirm that they're actually working, and then it runs the boot code. Sorry, flashes the boot code for the 2 processors. Then it flashes the actual user code for both processors on there, and then we're done. And then we take it over to a regular Windows computer, and we run the Arduino IDE, and then we check it out to make sure it works properly.
Right.
And it's done.
Send it give it power, send it a couple signals, make sure it responds correctly.
We open up a terminal, and we light. There's a red, green, blue LED. We light the red, the green, and the blue to make sure the 3 work. We press the button so that the program light lights and flashes white.
Do you have it actually? Do you subscribe it and give it an ID with the cell company and actually have it set as?
No, and the reason why is because where they're being assembled, we do check that it reads the SIM card. But where it's being assembled, I'm not quite sure the cell service is that good because it doesn't connect. And sometimes when it doesn't connect, it can sit there for 5 minutes. And for a technician to wait 5 minutes just to check one out, it's not worth it.
Right.
It's better to make sure that it can read the SIM and do it in a place where we know we have cell service, like here.
Right. Yeah.
So here we connect, and even here sometimes it might take a minute to connect.
So that's part of your packaging process once you've gotten it.
Right. Right.
Oh, interesting.
It takes a bit to make sure.
And by the way, remember what I was saying about physical access? Yeah, that's why you don't want to give physical access. Anyway.
Right.
That's a shtick now. I do that. The moment of Zen, where this is why, even if you don't know what we're talking about technobabble-wise, that maybe it might be good to watch this show. You know, part of the idea for the show is that we're living in a technocracy, and there's all these complex decisions being made by people in the know, and so many people out there. I mean, they can't even. I mean, they can't govern. You know, as far as it being a republic, they don't understand how their own devices in their own houses work and under their own control. They don't know which. You know, they solve problems by throwing money at new hardware and new rollouts.
My wife
and you know, I want them to get into the fold.
My wife
for us to at least take better care of them.
My wife just finished reading Bad Blood.
Yeah.
About Theranos, the blood testing company.
Well, I have no idea what that is.
Oh, okay. So this pretty woman, Stanford sophomore or junior, dropout, comes up with an idea for testing blood in minute quantities, a single drop from a finger stick. Okay. And she's going to do all these standard blood tests, which require, 3 or 4 vials of blood. So it transforms the industry. She gets Henry Kissinger and George Shultz on her board. She raises $1 billion or so. And when it first came out, I said, it's a fraud. It can't work. It just doesn't work. And so now it all collapsed. There's an HBO special. There's a book. And you should check it out. But basically it all collapsed within the space of a year. And she's barred from entering the business, the healthcare business, I think the healthcare business. And she's going to be barred by the SEC for various reasons.
And when did this happen?
It's all happened. It all unfolded within the last year.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. So the name of the book is Bad Blood.
When are we going to stop having South Sea bubbles? You know, I mean.
Yeah, I don't quite know. I don't quite understand what exactly happened. I mean, she would go because I've been to pitches. We go to pitches and we say, look, there's $1 billion market out there. We want to capture 10% of it. Right. But and what happens? I'll tell you what the investors say. He said, well, we're really looking at the $10 billion market. So everybody out there wants to be in on the next Facebook, Uber, Lyft, Google. startup, and there aren't any. So this looked like that.
Ah, okay.
So yeah, and it was just a fraud. And so it's starting to reveal the fake it till you make it culture of privately held companies that make nothing.
Fire ready aim.
Yeah,
which is considered completely acceptable for the strictly software business.
Right, exactly.
Where you don't have something that's completely off, and if it fails, you got to physically go to each individual device. Where you could just go across the internet and update someone's Tesla. Oh wait, no, those should be separate things.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, look, there's funny stories about, hardware development is not an easy task. Software development, you can throw a beta out there and say, look, it's free, do whatever you want with it, and people say, okay, great. It makes a phone call.
And that has a place. I'm not totally trashing it. I mean, if it's a goofy app that your kids are playing on their cell phones, it's probably okay as long as they can patch it.
But one of the things you hear in some of these startup accelerators and so on is that if you're going to make something, even hardware and software, and if it's not going to work, you want it to fail big early. And in fact, we have had a couple early big failures, and that is we were installing one of our devices in a basement of a hotel in Manhattan, and that oil tank is about almost the size of this room, and about 10 feet high. So I dropped the copper, and then we were using copper tubing then for the pressure tubing. I dropped the copper tube in, and I'm feeling resistance as I'm pushing the copper tube in, and then I said, okay, well, we'll get it to the bottom and then close it up and see what happens. And then when we get back to the office and we look at the data the next couple of days, the pressure's changing and we don't know why. And then I did a quick calculation. The tube is floating. It's starting to float. It's got air in it.
Oh.
And it's so long and flexible that it actually just started to float up. And it was screwing up our device.
Oh.
So that was a failure.
Okay.
We attached a weight to it to hold it down.
All right, give me your tackle box.
But wait, there's a picture of me doing it in Dan's papers actually about 4 years ago. There's a picture we used as a promo picture of me lying on the top. First of all, I had to be supine to do it.
Right.
On the top of this tank in the basement of the W Hotel.
Right. Did you get filthy?
Yes.
So you got slimed. So it was just like Ghostbusters.
Oh, exactly. I have my miner's lamp on.
Nice.
So yeah, it was. Yeah, it was quite a feat. We had been back to that hotel probably 3 or 4 times making corrections to this thing. And the company itself, we realized afterwards, was never intending to buy any of them.
No.
They just wanted to see what was, can we do this? Can we do that?
Did you steal some hors d'oeuvres from a party or anything?
No. Well, maybe Tom did. I was up on the tank.
I hope he did.
He was out in the hallway.
Okay. So I'm curious. So you mentioned you have batteries available for the units. What kind of batteries do you use?
We use lithium-ion batteries. Right now, we use 2 separate types. We have rechargeables that we're testing, but right now we're using basically lithium-ion energizers, and those are looking like probably 2.5 to 3 years of battery life.
Okay.
But those have to be replaced. Those are primary batteries.
Right. Of course, the ideal would be some kind of either solar in the case of propane, or if it's an outside. Do you have solar available for outside oil tanks? If it is an outside, like on the side of the house kind of oil tank.
The answer is that's no different than what we have for the propane reader, but we don't have a working model yet. We have the prototype.
It's on the pipeline.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. All of our external devices can be solar powered.
Do you guys offer upgrades for to better models as you come out with them?
You would have to ask my chief operating officer that. I'll get shot if I answer that question.
Okay, never mind. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw a monkey wrench in the works.
No. Yeah,
I've got lots of questions.
Those decisions, even after a glass of wine, I wouldn't be able to answer.
I almost had them. All right, I was just curious if what the power source options were. So I saw you had another promo. We had this gigantic poster. So we have this nice poster for Poem, and we had this gigantic thing. We couldn't fit it in here, and it had a picture of a cell phone on it, and a chart. And I assume it was this chart, or is it something else? What was the deal with that cell phone?
That was that chart. But Tom has written a multi-device interface. So the mobile interface shows the chart, but it's a little bit
so it's just
squashed.
An app that goes to the web page and looks at it. It doesn't go directly connect to the unit,
right?
Because you'd have to because it sends it so infrequently you'd have to cache it anyway.
As we say, nobody connects to the unit.
Right.
It only connects to our
Nobody
service.
connects to the unit. Yeah,
Right.
I love it. No, it's good. Perfect data. Even if the consumers don't appreciate it, I appreciate it. So
Right.
thank you for not sucking.
Right. You're welcome.
Do you have you guys managed to get any good IP or patents out of this, or?
The answer is no, and that's because now the patent attorneys are going to kill me, because the patent attorneys are so
Just tell me you can't answer, man. It's fine.
No, I can answer. No, the patent attorneys are so expensive that we decided to abandon the patents on. We had a patent pending on
Is it too easy to work around, or?
No, what happened is it's a little bit of a miscommunication. I thought I was being clear about what we were claiming, and the patent examiner seemed not to take that into account.
You have to get Apple's patent examiner. He doesn't care.
Yeah, because they patented rounded corners.
Yeah,
you know, they patented rounded corners.
Sorry.
So it took
Yes,
them,
we can't say fucking here. Fuck.
but it took them 3 years. It took them like 3 or 4 years in an army of attorneys.
Yeah.
So we have a magnetic device. This guy right here. This guy right here reads the position of this internal red float. We put a magnet on top of that, and inside here are an array of sensors. So in our patent claim, we claim that we can interpolate to better than this 25% resolution.
Okay.
We interpolate between the sensors to get the actual position of where the float is.
Right.
By looking at the mathematical shape of the magnetic field,
Right.
and comparing what the two sensors on either side of the magnet see.
So the difference between the two sensors.
Not quite. We actually analyzed the shape to find out fractionally where in between the two sensors it is,
Okay.
not just halfway.
So what level of precision?
About 2 to 3%, something like that.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
way better than that.
Right, but the examiner didn't seem to take that into account, and because this detection of a magnetic position, of a position of a magnet with sensors, was done by
The dude literally didn't know what the word precision meant.
right. Well, it was done by Scully, the Scully Gauge Company, which
Yeah.
makes this actual gauge.
Right.
It was done by them like 30 years ago, 20 years ago, but they
Right.
used a hardwired telephone line and a bunch of reed switches.
Right.
So when you got to the reed switch, it was an open or shut, so it was just a binary decision. There was no interpolation involved.
Okay.
So I said that was our claim, and that was ignored. Meanwhile, $20,000, so it wasn't worth it.
Right.
We weren't selling 20,000 worth of the eye levels.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of this is a great segue. Sorry to stick on the show. The very first episode we had. I don't have any good segue stories this time.
Sorry.
But kind of a segue into intellectual property, and what most people don't realize is that unfortunately, and this is a perfect example of that, a lot of intellectual property is just these massive patent portfolios backed up by these massive armies of lawyers, and the companies aren't actually patenting things for the sake of promoting innovation within their own companies. It's like a defensive position against potential wars against other companies, and then they take all their patents and they put them on the table and they say, okay, this is what we got, what do you got? And then they negotiate a deal, who gets how much money from who.
There's a term for that, though, and that is the picket fence of patents surrounding your IP. Now, it's valid for certain things. One of my partners is a patent attorney, and I won't mention who he is, only because
it's fine.
We're talking.
If it's a good thing, mention him. Otherwise, don't.
He's got some ventures that he's trying to raise money for, and he's describing how
we do attorneys, by the way, if he wants to come on the show. So, yeah.
He might actually.
There's plenty to talk about.
Right. He has a patent thicket around his IP, protecting the various tiny little pieces of the IP, and this is for automotive LiDAR sensing.
Okay.
And that's a huge market.
I mean, even a minor discovery there is billions.
And, right. And so he's an IP attorney, and so he said, I think I'm reasonably well protected, so the idea is okay, and then we're going to move forward on it. That's different from, say, intellectual ventures, which, do you know who Stephen Mervold is?
No idea. He's
got an interesting backstory. So my degree's in physics, so I know fairly, a lot about these sort of characters. He has his PhD, I think, from Cambridge, but I'm not sure, in physics. Okay. And then he was working as Stephen Hawking's postdoc.
Oh, well, that's pretty prestigious.
And while he was there, He
hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I got to know. Stephen Hawking, I have read a book of his, so I have some idea. But is he all that in a bag of chips, or is he a little overblown?
No, he's all that.
Okay.
No.
Okay, fair enough. Continue.
So Nathan Myhrvold is his name, sorry. Nathan Myhrvold was Stephen Hawking's postdoc, and while he was there, he started doing some coding for Microsoft.
Right.
Met Bill Gates. Bill Gates said, "Why don't you be my CTO?" So he then became CTO of Microsoft.
Wow.
And then
It's a lucky break.
He decided to do, when in San Francisco, he decided to learn how to cook. So he became a sous chef at the various restaurants while he was working at Microsoft. And now he's basically
He's
written this large set of books called Modernist Cuisine,
yes.
which I have. But the point is, he's got a company called Intellectual Ventures, and all they do is buy up patents.
Oh, really?
To license them. They don't make a thing. So here he was. He's somebody that I actually sort of looked up to a little bit at one point,
right.
And now he's just a patent.
So I was right. So the moral of the story is, not sleeping does make you evil.
That's right.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. You
right.
sleep a little. You don't have to. You can sleep when you're dead, but also sleep a little in between, because otherwise, the dreams don't come.
Right, but that kind of thing is completely separate from the kind of thing that you want to do when you want to protect your property. Mm-hmm. When you want to protect your property and you have an idea to go forward with a development of something, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the only way to proceed if you're a small business is trade secrets. Just hide it as long as you possibly can.
Right.
And then.
Well, for instance, I say
hide it, then pray.
Our algorithm for turning the pressure into inches, I say we have a proprietary algorithm. We turn pressure into inches.
Right.
Because normally, in order to do that, you'd have to blow the tube out to make sure it was filled completely with air.
Right.
But we can't do that. We're battery operated. We can't run a motor.
Right.
So we allow the liquid to rise up into the tube, which means the pressure is off from the full height.
How do you have a relief valve on it or something?
No, there's nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. Just sitting there, going up and down, up and down. It's like a closed drum. You press on a closed drum, and the pressure is changing as you press on it.
Okay. So actually,
but the actual numbers.
So even though you're actually technically measuring air pressure, it's really you're using the air pressure to measure the height of static.
We have to compensate for the amount of liquid that's flowing up into the tube.
Right.
Because on some of these.
How do you know?
Kidneys. So on some of these tanks, like at the W Hotel, an inch of fluid was 100 gallons, so $300. So if you're off by an inch, you're off by $300.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, I mean, in a way, it's self-correcting in the fact that you're just delivering the amount. Obviously, the guy's not going to deliver more than the tank can hold, but
he might deliver less.
He might deliver less. Yes, fair enough.
And pump some back in the truck.
Yep.
Pass the meter.
Yeah.
The meter says 100 gallons.
That's the downside of not utilities.
The meter says 100 gallons went through the pipe.
Yep.
The tank said 80 gallons came in.
Yeah.
The 20 went back.
Wow. I'm not maniacal enough. I didn't even think of that.
If you look on our Facebook website, you'll see Wanda has posted a story about a $12 million oil theft. The $12 million theft of oil.
Wow.
In New York City alone.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's that'd be a good Law and Order.
It was a movie.
It was a movie, really?
Yeah, it was about, I forget what, the Big Hustler, something like that.
Okay.
It's a movie about the oil industry in the 70s.
Okay.
The oil delivery industry in the 70s.
Wow. By the way, do you have any, again, we're mostly New York viewers. It's global. People watch us all over the place. But since we're in New York, do you have an oil company that you recommend or that you guys trust, that you've had good experiences with? You don't have to go there if you don't want to.
I don't have any I would recommend.
Okay. You're not going to go with that.
I don't have any I would not recommend either.
Okay. Fair enough.
They're all clients. Okay. They're all potential clients.
Right. Oh, see that? There's an opportunity here.
Right.
Show how honest and good you are. Yeah. Okay. So, so the next thing I wanted to know about was what other tools are you using? So you mentioned that you were using the OpenOCD to actually flash the things,
right?
And off of your Pi. And then
some of our engineering tools are pretty fantastic, I would have to say. but they're a little bit off. They're more towards the administrative side. We use a tool called Arena for bill of materials control, and it's one of the best things.
That's not what I would thought you would talk about. But
it's one of the best things I've ever used.
Really?
In terms of an engineering design tool.
Okay. It's also an engineering design tool. Okay.
In the sense that it controls your release process.
Yep.
So when this starts out as a drawing and goes through all the revisions and who controls the revisions and how much does it cost, Arena controls all that.
Right.
And that's one tool that we use. We use Onshape for mechanical drawing, which is Google's mechanical drawing package.
The CAD.
It's their CAD version.
Okay.
And for electrical circuit design, we use Altium, again, which is the gold-plated standard for all this stuff.
So Altium, is that for the induction kind of stuff?
Altium does the circuit design, and it lays out the board and it creates all the design files for this guy.
Right.
But not only that, but it also does, which other design programs don't do, it creates a 3D model of that as well.
Oh, really?
It also finds your parts for you.
What?
And it compares them. It gives you a list of prices.
That's why it's the gold standard.
It's amazing.
Is it super expensive, or is it based on seats or usage? Or
it's licensed by seats. It's relatively, it's not as expensive as you might expect for what it is. The version of software used by, for instance, Adafruit, you know who Adafruit is?
Yeah,
Lady
Adafruit is.
Adafruit uses...
Adafruit is a great source for Raspberry Pi parts.
That's right. And a lot of other stuff, all prototyping stuff. We buy all our prototyping stuff from her.
Oh, great. Okay.
So they use Eagle. And Eagle is a design tool that you use to create your own parts and make schematics and layouts and all this other stuff. And there's a reasonably large learning curve for it. But the output...
what was this again? Sorry, it was
Eagle. Eagle PCB. Okay. But the output is a little bit... you wouldn't be proud to publish it.
Okay.
But the output from Altium, you could put in a book.
Right.
And actually it creates the book for you, almost.
Okay.
But I mean, we can get very technical very quickly. So it's
right. So well, I think I can help a little bit. So in case you're completely lost at what the heck we're talking about, so Altium is when you're designing circuitry, and most people don't understand this. So when you have an electrical current and two electrical currents go side by side, they actually create a little bit of magnetism, and that magnetism can create electricity in a parallel adjoining wire. Like they're not connected, but they're running right next to each other. So you can't let wires run too long next to each other at whatever particular, it's voltage and amperage dependent.
Right.
And so you have to, it's not just enough to design the wires to go to the places you need them to go, you need them to not interfere with each other.
Right, you need to know how to run them.
You need to know how to run them so that they don't mess with each other.
For example,
and also some of the devices on the board also create interference.
Well, for example, how does this guy on the top connect with these guys on the bottom? This printed circuit board has 8 layers.
Oh, wow.
Of wires.
Okay.
And
I'm so stupid of me because I'm not an E guy.
Right.
I just assumed it was 2 layers and it was just top and bottom.
There's no way to make this into it's impossible to make this on 2 layers. If this were a 2-layer board, it'd be the size of this sheet of paper.
Wow. Okay.
So there are 8 layers on this board, and what Altium does is it allows you to send to the design house what's called the layer stack up, which is something that is critical for them to know. In Eagle, it's hard to do. In Altium, it's basically
it's a cinch.
And not only that, but it gives you a drawing that you could put in a book, literally in a book.
I imagine because it's so easy to use that probably a lot of other people are using. So you say, "Oh, I'm going to send you an Altium file." I'm like, "Oh yeah."
It's hard to use. It's a big learning curve.
Oh no! I mean for people in the industry, if you're trying to send a design to someone for them to actually build the thing in mass.
Right. Now I'm not a professional at it, but we do have a guy that we use occasionally for consulting services on PC board design, and he's coming up to speed on it as well, and he loves it. But I think, in fact, he enjoys using it just for the hell of it.
Cool.
So,
that's really great.
Yeah, but those are the engineering tools we use. Basically, Onshape, Altium, and Arena.
Is it reasonably? I realize the big chip is probably you're kind of stuck with that to some degree, but
no, actually,
we're going
to change. Now, here's the funny story. This guy here, this small microprocessor, was sold out when we started making these. There were none available in the world.
Wow.
So I back ordered some, and we had a letter of intent for 1,000 devices.
Right.
Then all of a sudden Hologram said, we're not making these anymore.
Right.
I said,
oh, you mentioned that before.
right.
Yes.
So I said, Ben, you just killed our schedule. We have a letter of intent for 1,000 devices.
Right.
So I hung the phone up. I looked at my partners in the meeting. I said, well, we'll make it ourselves. But so now we're making these ourselves. This processor, there were none available in the world. So I back ordered probably 1,000 from DigiKey or something like that. And then I said, let me scrounge around, see wherever I can find them. And I told the design house to go ahead and make the printed circuit boards, but as soon as we get the other parts, you can put them on when we get them. So it turns out that DigiKey had already realized they had run out, and they said they were like 6 months back ordered, but they really weren't. They were like 3 weeks back ordered.
Okay.
And as soon as they all arrived, I just happened to click, and suddenly all of a sudden they were there. I ordered all of them. So now again, I cornered the market on them. So if anybody else was going to try and make this, right? If anybody else was going to try and make this, they couldn't.
Right.
So
okay. So maybe there is a market for you to resell to your competitors.
Right. So now, So now we have. But I think they're probably in stock. This was like 8 months ago.
Right.
6 or 8 months ago. So now they're probably in stock. But now we're also we're producing them. They're being tested right now. In fact, I was out there today.
Okay. Great. Yeah, so I know that one of the reasons I asked is because I know Qualcomm had a lock on cell phone chips for a while, and they had some patents, and they were also the only ones making certain kinds of chips.
We were looking actually, unfortunately, one of the best chips that I thought we were going to be using if we weren't going to be using this U-Block chip was the Huawei chip. That of course the United States has tried to bar.
What is it?
HUAWEI.
Oh, okay. I know them, yes.
Right. So the United States accused them of putting spyware on the cell phone.
Oh, that's the one?
Yeah.
That's the same? That sucks.
So this guy...
Well, I guess it wouldn't matter for you, though. Oh, no, it's sending out, right? Yeah, it's still good.
This guy costs $30. The Huawei chip costs $6 or $8.
Okay.
So it's...
So they had a really good day that day. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but there are others as well. But unfortunately,
I mean, totally seriously. I mean, this seems like a complete distraction from anything you guys are doing. But as far as the entire country being filled with Internet of Things devices, this is a serious consideration. I mean, if there's only 2 or 3 or 4 companies making the chips that would typically be used in a cell phone auxiliary board, and 2 of them have back doors on them, and then they're found within the reasonable time of each other.
You want to get even more paranoid?
There'd be a total shortage, and another leg in the cyber war.
U-Blox is a Swiss company.
Yep.
Huawei is a Chinese company. The big competitor to U-Blox right now is Quectel, which makes a great modem. They're also Chinese. There is no, as far as I know, Qualcomm is not a U.S. company. They don't make their stuff in the U.S., I don't think. As far as I know, there's no U.S. Cell phone modem manufacturer. Sierra Wireless might be the only one, and I'm not sure whether the modems are made here.
No.
But that's also a good choice.
And that's why World War IV will be sticks and stones.
Yeah,
because Taiwan will be obliterated and we won't be able to get any more chips.
Again, just for the designers out there, the reason we go with a design like this, prefab, is because I didn't design this, Hologram designed it. And that's because you cannot just take a radio, slap it on a board, and then sell it mass market.
Right.
Right. You need FCC certifications. So one of the things you can do is you can buy a module like this, which is what's called pre-certified or end-use certified. And if you don't make any modifications, just hook up the antenna to it, the antenna that is supposed to be hooked up to it, you're okay.
Yeah.
Our original design was a Sierra Wireless design, but there was no end-use certified module. So again, you're talking about a $10,000 to $20,000 certification process in 6 months. So there's no get to market quickly with those things.
Right.
So you have to use something that's already been designed.
So there is a, who knows, maybe you guys are going to become the certification standard. There really is like...
I'll tell you right now, my Sierra Wireless design would pass certifications very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Throw me the money and we'll get it certified and we'll go to market
Well, I'm thinking more of it in terms of, as a source for a one-way cell connection, durable goods,
Well, that's what, right, and exactly, and that's what we're trying to do with this guy here. This is the development.
Hell, I would even buy that thing in Adafruit, much less, buy it in mass to stick in refrigerators.
I think Lady Ada is not selling it.
You see what I'm seeing?
No, we contacted them and said, let's sell the Dash on Adafruit, but I think they're not interested. They have too many development modules.
Really?
Yeah, they're starting to come out of the woodwork everywhere.
When it's not a development module, would you revisit it?
Sure. But you know, there's our competitor in that.
I mean, half a Lilac would buy one. That's why.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, I know one guy that works in a company that does this kind of thing already, but it's a two-way connector, and I really like the idea of having a company pushing something that only goes out.
Yeah, but
doesn't have any way in.
But that's under your control.
Right.
So our competitor here is the particle.
Right. Someone could just flash it with their own stuff and do evil with it.
Our competitor,
or unintentional evil.
Right. Our competitor here is particle, and particle just doesn't have as many bells and whistles, but does the same thing, and it's less expensive.
And that's because of the functionality of the chip itself.
And some extra stuff that's on the board.
So you gotta wonder now, since we're talking about the cyber war and you know, if that's a happy accident that there is no chip that doesn't have an out mode. That is, you figured somebody would sell a reasonably priced chip that would only have input. It would be hard burned into the chip itself.
Nah, you're stuck with the network protocol. It's a phone.
Oh, you're saying the network protocol would prohibit it?
Right. It's a phone.
That would be a discovery if you found a way to.
It's a phone. It's got to accept incoming calls.
Right.
And even the Wi-Fi.
That's more of an IEEE thing.
Right. And even the Wi-Fi devices, there's no such thing as a
standardization thing. I mean. Yeah.
Right. Even Wi-Fi devices, there's no such thing as a one-way trip because it's a handshake. TCP/IP.
Yeah, of course.
So it's a handshake. So you got to go both ways.
Go back and forth.
At least from the router.
Yeah.
So
they haven't picked it up yet, but I've been renaming my videos TTL for the Technocrat Live. But so we're TTL 06.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, little inside geek joke.
Right.
So, but you see what I'm saying about it.
Yes.
I mean, it drives me crazy. I don't understand why I can't find a company that is, because on the one hand, I'd love to see a company that actually would certify their stuff for 30 years, like durable goods typically are expected to last.
Right.
And at least prorate it. Like have some kind of get insurance, do something. Put expectations out there, and also, but having a lockdown device where where a wire was cut on the damn thing and you couldn't even make it go in.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of making a device that you set it out into the world and get it spinning and then leave it alone forever, that appeals to a designer and so, but it certainly doesn't appeal to the business people who want to get that out of circulation and replace it with the new model. Right. Because you want to. People
are going to get mad. They're going to get mad.
You want to keep selling.
And you know what? It only takes one law to ruin their day.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right, but you want to keep selling. So.
Right.
You don't want something to last 30 years.
Yeah, but it's wrong. It's still wrong. It's still wrong, people. All right. Anyway, it's not your product. Your product's fine. You're the good case.
Right.
Yeah. So I had a question. So you guys, other than Raspberry Pi and obviously Linux, are you using any other open source tools in-house or?
I think that is probably it. I think.
Okay.
We might.
And I know you're using Windows.
Yeah.
And you told me about all the different pieces of software you're using. So.
Right. And
of course, the cell phones themselves for whatever the app is, which is really just a web browser, essentially.
Yeah. And I think, look, we can certainly write all of our code in the Arduino IDE as well. But I think Tom has just chosen, he likes Microsoft's Visual Editor. So
whatever's, you can always change it later.
Right, and he's the guy that does that. So.
Right.
But no, other than the Raspberry Pi stuff and the stuff that this is basically an Arduino connected to a cell phone.
Yeah.
So when we use the Arduino IDE, we just basically are using the open source versions of stuff that's available.
Right.
All the code Hologram is written is all open source. Everything's done on GitHub. GitHub is our repository. That's the last of the tools.
Is it public or private?
Some of the stuff.
They don't have private available now.
Yeah, some of the stuff is public, but all of our code is on the private side.
That's good because you don't want to have a happy accident where you
That's
go.
Right. No, all the code. Yeah.
Yeah. I was I've been in a couple shops who were switching to Git, and things get uploaded. It's not always good.
Right.
By accident, of course. Nobody's doing it on purpose. It's you can forgive them, but it doesn't mean it's not out there. Once it's out there, it just takes one download, and then it's never secure again.
I think Tom has built in his authentication into his Visual Studio. I think it's integrated into Visual Studio. So as soon as he finishes and commits, it's done.
Right. So like normally the problem is that with something like a password, it's a changeable thing. But sometimes, especially when you have a hardware burn-in and there's installations and they're in the wild, you know, if you have a private key that you're trusting and it gets uploaded by accident to GitHub or something, you're you just incurred $1 million cost or whatever.
The firmware. I'd be surprised if the firmware wasn't completely locked down. And besides, I have copies of it elsewhere.
Right. Well, no, not that. I mean, like you know, if they can get their hands on a private key, then they, you know what I mean.
Right.
So I was curious about what do you do for IDEs or code management? You know, when you're
IDEs Visual Studio is.
What do you program in?
I program in Python.
Nice.
Tom hates Python, so he programs in. I think
things are better over here on the Python side of the shop.
So I think he probably uses C#.
C#. Okay. All right.
But
you guys have a paintball match or something? A pool game?
No, he used to work for Microsoft, so I think he was used to developing on it. And look, he's a good developer, so it's you know, it's what he wants to do.
I think
he doesn't like Python because it's interpreted. He likes to see what's going on.
Right.
So.
And I completely understand that. That makes sense, especially when you're dealing with hardware, because there's a whole other layer you may not have total control over.
Right. Right. But on the other hand, you know, I did this kind of Bitcoin stuff originally. I wrote, I think in Python, I did like a little minor, see what would happen in Python, and you know, it's made, I don't know, 10 lines of code. Right. So it's, you know, it's different. It's all completely different.
I bet that's a really complicated line of code. But there might be one killer one-liner there.
But there are all these modules.
Right.
So
just include.
Right. Yeah. The other tool that I use often, but for my own playground and enjoyment, is Mathematica, and that's what I use to decode your address.
Oh, okay, cool.
Right, but that's
so we actually had a Steg talk. We had a couple of Steg talks at our user group at Lilog. So I fooled around a bit with it. I actually came up with a new concept for steganography. So one of the things that we're running into in the tech world is that we're generating words faster than we can, you know, concepts faster than we can make words for them.
Right.
Or at least faster than we can communicate what the words are for them. Even we have, you know, every shop's got its own little slang. But this concept of tiered steganography, where you have, and it sounds like what? And what it really is when you're trying to send, perfect example, like, you know, like monotheistic religions, Abrahamic religions. I think a lot of the passages frequently say something to one person and to another person at different levels, right? So somebody who's, you know, rather simple-minded will read one thing, and somebody who's, you know, maybe looking at the original Hebrew, or, you know, trying to figure out the original order of the words, and they know the history of the context. Okay, that means something else, and sending multiple messages at once.
Right.
So in a way, that's kind of the idea with this show, is that I'm trying to get people in more to involve themselves and be less scared of tech.
Right.
In a broader sense, we're inherently tiered steganography. But anyway, so I just think, because you're so into stag, I thought that would be.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a better word for it, but I think.
No, it's probably good. I only got into it. It's not that I was really that inherently interested in it. I only got into it because of this blockchain talk that I was doing.
Right.
And then when I read Sheriff's thing
so good,
about,
though.
Look at all the stuff that people are throwing into these addresses.
So the idea is, with steganography, is that you can have like a photo or a video or music or something, and hidden inside of it is another message. Now this was a very simple. This is a bad illustrative case for someone who doesn't know what a Bitcoin address is.
Because
already.
There's no hidden message.
There's no hidden message, right?
Right.
But you can hide a picture of a cat in a picture of a dog.
Right.
Or you can hide, go to the point at midnight and drop the bomb. This is hypothetical, all right? But inside of a picture of a marching band or something like that. The thing that's interesting about this is, if you really understand this, you understand that the entire internet is suspect, and that, you know, like when you get, you know, this becomes almost like this almost becomes an intro to the problem of controlling supply lines doesn't necessarily work. to control information. And the reason I say that is, you have the Great Firewall of China, right? But this message is being passed back and forth.
Right.
Ordinary Chinese, which I think is really what the Chinese government is worried about. They're not really worried about the text. Their strategy is to employ them rather than to fight them.
Well, they don't want ordinary Chinese to get the message.
But they don't want.
Because there are a lot of ordinary Chinese.
There are a lot of ordinary Chinese, but they're not so worried about the text sending the stag because they can't really stop that.
Right.
So when they have the Great Firewall of China, what they're really doing is they're trying to get the everyman prevent him from sending.
So this is this is a subject that is inherent in the digital world, and that is that one digital representation is a vacuous statement. You could have a digital something encoded in hex and something encoded in this base 58 encoder for Bitcoin. The same set of ones and zeros will give you two different outcomes depending on how you encode it.
Right.
Now, if you're clever, you can make those two different outcomes have meanings.
Right.
Right now, this one outcome has no meaning because it doesn't carry any weight. But if it said NelsonMandela.jpg, not only would it be a Bitcoin address, but it would also be the name of a picture file that was encoded in the transaction.
Right. If you're looking for a picture and it's a URL, you're never going to see it.
Right.
Yeah. And if you're looking, and of course now there's ways you can.
But ultimately, all it is just a string of ones.
But if they have a one-time pad at their side, forget it.
But all it is just a string.
Which they probably do if they're that advanced.
Just a string of ones and zeros.
Right.
And it can mean both things simultaneously depending on how you encode it or decode it.
I mean, this is something that's happening. A revolution that's happening in everything, in the entire internet space, and I think it's a bummer because a lot of people don't get what's going on there. I mean, this really started with music, and like first people who started encoding music, and they were just long strings of numbers, and people are downloading MP3s, and all of a sudden the recording industry went, "Whoa, my God!" And then it was movies, and then there was the DMCA and the Kaplan case, and now what most recently, most people don't realize is that this is happening now with firearms. The people are trading plans for firearms, for complete and total plans, and they work.
Right.
I mean, there are people out there with videos like, look, it works. They 3D print a Glock from scratch, and it works.
Yeah. Well, have somebody
a rifle that shot 700 rounds before it broke.
Yep. And I mean, I've been kind of holding off on talking about this.
But have somebody else fire it first.
Right. So I mean, I can't even. I have to say, I can't even. I'm a little nervous to even download the files because I don't want to, run a file.
Well, somebody will know that you did it.
Somebody will know I did it. But hopefully, it would just be the person who will put it up. But
unless you use the Tor browser.
Right. Yeah, I know how to do that, but I don't want to. That's not the point. I don't know whether they work or not. We're the most restrictive.
This is not.
The point is the centralized manufacturing is no longer. You can't say, okay, this is your mechanism, and you can't. You have to follow the rules.
But it's not unique to the digital world, but there is a fundamental difference. And so that spy messages 100 years ago, you might have to read with a magnifier because they were embedded in the lines of a drawing or something like that, or like the
Did you see the logo for the thing?
No.
So it's a piece of paper with the code written on the side. I forgot the name of it. Wow, it's been so long since. Anyway, keep going.
But back in the 60s, there was that subliminal message, "Drink Coke" in the drive-in movie theaters. In between the advertisers, it was they would flash "Drink Coke."
That freaking Bill Clinton had to apologize for the national anthem having a subliminal message in it. The one that they played for 10 years on every TV station.
Yeah, so those were they were ineffective, but those they were illegal. They were made illegal, but they're ineffective. They don't do anything, but they're actually there.
Yeah.
The fundamental difference in the digital world.
No one figured it out for 20 years. So.
Right, because you couldn't see them.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the fundamental difference in the digital world is that once you so it's transitory. The Drink Coke, you have to stop the projector to see it. Right. In the digital world, you could have two copies of that same the message and the hidden message, and they're permanent.
Right.
They don't change.
Right.
Once you've extracted them, they're there.
Right.
That's the fundamental difference.
I see. Okay. So the extraction, because you have infinite copies. copies, you can have various states of encryption, encrypted here, not encrypted here, encrypted here.
Basically, all you need is the right magnifying glass.
Right.
Right. So if the hidden print is tiny, so written on a grain of rice and thrown into a bowl, right, you just need the right magnifier.
All information is just a line on a stick. If it's a big enough stick and a fine enough line.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So anyway.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. I think that's the fundamental difference, is that you can make copies that actually really have an effect, rather than subliminal ones that don't have any effect.
Right. Right. Well, they do have an effect. That's why I think Clinton had to apologize.
They don't. People just don't like them.
I wonder why.
No, but they don't. Nobody drank more Coke.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, there was no.
It has no effect.
Did someone do an analysis on
No,
that?
somebody found them. Somebody said, "Hey, what was that?" They glanced. I said, "Drink Coke."
I'm not willing to sign off on that. I think I disagree. I think it maybe doesn't have an effect on you.
Look it up. Nobody drank more Coke.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, so there was a statistical analysis of it after.
I think so. Yeah, there were studies done. Yeah, it doesn't. If you can't see it, it doesn't affect you. It's like we've been to Cuba, and a year ago we were in Cuba.
Right.
We drove by the American embassy. There was no low frequency sound waves. We had no headaches. We had none of that stuff. All the stuff that the ambassadors reported.
Right.
Right. And so the stuff doesn't. It wasn't there.
So that's actually another kind of steganography. It's called a lie. And if you're not familiar with it, look it up.
No, but if it's not there, it's not steganography.
Yeah. I'm kidding. Yeah. Have you guys have any original ideas as a result of the work you've done so far with Poem? Like something you haven't discussed yet that you want to tell everybody about.
Let's see.
Something fun. I mean, nothing. Don't sell yourself short if you have an idea that really is in the secrecy, like a trade secret kind of space. But
we thought we had an original idea, which turns out to have been patented 20 years ago for a completely different reason. And we do have a European patent on a current monitor, which is an original idea, but it exists only as a non-working prototype and a granted patent in the EU.
Okay. Well, at least you have prior art,
Yeah. Well,
no one can patent you out of your own invention.
The great idea that we had.
Prior art's where you, if you can demonstrate in a patent case, if someone sues you for patent infringement, and you can say we were doing this
we were doing it already, right?
Yeah.
So the brilliant idea we had was that people have tried to monitor the liquid levels with pressure before, and were unsuccessful. So I think we're probably successful at doing it when other people haven't been able to. And part of that secret is we put a bell, which is called a pipe nipple, actually, at the end of our tube.
Nipple.
Right. We put that at the end of our tube, and what it does is, so now as the fluid rises up into the tube, the error caused by the amount that rises up into the tube, we wanted to minimize that. So we calculated how big the nipple should be so that any change in height would be a large change in volume would be a small change in height. So what does that mean? You need a big area. Right. So we use a large diameter nipple, 6 inches long. So now the fluid only rises this high into the tube, maybe. So that's our error in our measurement. We just say, okay, the pressure is this, and the error is maybe 1/4 of an inch, but we only read out to the nearest inch.
So that's how
it's an ignorable error. It's an ignorable error.
Okay, now I get how you did it, because I was like, how do you know where the oil level is? But you can use the rate of change on the nipple.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it turns out 20 years ago, a guy patented.
I kind of blew it off before, but I didn't get it. Now I get it.
So 20 years ago, a guy patented the exact same idea to correct for temperature variations. And I said, it's the wrong idea. It should have been for pressure variations, and he would have had the. Right, because as the temperature in his tube changed, the volume would change.
Lucky break for you, you would have been licensing it.
Yeah.
In a way, you think it's bad, but actually it's good. They blew it.
So it turns out, but we see the same structures everywhere. A lot of people have been using them for a long time, but for the purposes, they didn't realize why they were working the way they were working.
Spectacular. There's got to be automotive applications for that too.
I don't know. Maybe automotive fuel tanks are read differently because they have to they can't change whether you're braking or accelerating as the fluid changes its level.
Right.
And if you're going up a hill, it has to be the same as when you're going down a hill.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah. All right.
So it's automotive is different, and also it takes the regulatory agencies are.
Well, actually, I wasn't thinking fuel. I was thinking maybe one of the other, like the coolant or something like that.
Possibly, but it's again that's
Or oil pressure. Also.
Yeah. The other brilliant idea we had was the current monitor that we actually designed. I entered this competition to on a website called 9 Sites, which I think is now called 9 Sigma, and companies post engineering challenges there. And so I responded to one, and a Japanese company then contacted me, and they're big. It's Omron. They're like the GE of Japan.
Omron is the GE of Japan. How do I not know that? I feel like a
OMRON.
Okay.
They make relays and stuff like that.
I'll avoid using a funny accent. Keep going.
So they wanted, as you were discussing earlier about electrical signals, they wanted a current monitor that was able to wrap around a wire that was adjacent to another wire with large currents in it.
Okay.
And they didn't want the measurement of the current in the wire they were looking at to be affected by the other one.
They wanted to shield the two wires.
They wanted a shielded current sensor. And now there are such things. You've probably seen them. They look like pliers, and you clamp them around a wire.
Yes, I have them at home.
But they wanted a flexible one. And the reason those other clamp-on types are not flexible is because the magnetic element in there is a thing called, it's a ceramic called a ferrite, and it's a ceramic. It's rigid.
Right. And
so that's why those two jaws clamp together. They don't change their shape. So I developed a flexible shield using some exotic materials, what are called spin glasses, and made a sort of unique shape for them and bound them up into a ribbon and closed it up. And I said, okay, this is how it's going to work. And we had a nice meeting in Washington, D.C. They bought me a bottle of sake, and then there was the project manager, the PhD, the translator, and me, and we had a nice discussion. And then all of a sudden, the PhD looks me in the eye and starts almost screaming in Japanese for like a whole minute, maybe a minute and a half.
Wow. That's like a nightmare.
And then I looked at the
why did that happen?
And then I looked at the translator.
Yeah.
And she says, "We don't have the budget to continue with this at this moment." I said, "I don't think that's all he said." So,
why was he yelling at you?
I have no idea.
You still don't know? Huh?
No. She never told me what he said.
What?
So anyway, they gave me the bottle of sake. They thanked me, and then. So the project manager said we don't have the budget. I never heard that.
And what year was this? Is this when Japan was at its heyday?
No, this was not 5 years ago.
Oh, okay. So this wasn't like 89 or something when they're high.
No, it was like 5 days ago. 5 years ago. And so I left the meeting with the bottle of sake, and now I had to check my bag because the bottle of sake was there.
Right.
So flew back to New York and then filed my patent application immediately before they could get back to Japan.
Because you have no idea what he yelled at you.
Right. And that's the patent that was granted in the EU.
Great.
It's probably still pending in Japan, but the attorneys are too expensive. I said, forget it.
Okay.
They're still going back, and it costs.
Maybe that's what he was yelling. You'll never be able to afford our attorneys.
It costs you $500 every time the translator translates it.
Wow. Okay.
So, it's something like that. So it was too expensive, and it's hard to make. I don't think anybody's ever going to make it. It's an interesting idea, but it's
right. Well, you never know. Nanites might make everything different.
Yeah, but we're not. I mean, we're not developing that. In fact, I think we probably even removed it from our executive summary as the IP that we actually own.
Okay.
It would go with any sale of the company, but it's not not anything we're going to be making.
So,
that's a fantastic. Other than that, I've got fantastic ideas, but they're not related to my business.
Are you guys looking for venture, or are you self-sufficient at this point?
No, we're not at all self-sufficient. We're looking for investment.
You're just looking for investment and for business. Both.
Right, both.
Okay.
Right. Yes,
cool.
we we raised about 10%, about 13% of the companies from an equity sale that closed April 1st of last year. April 1st of last year.
Right.
So that was okay. That got us to where we are now, where we're producing stuff.
Can you believe we've been talking for an hour and a half?
Yeah, I guess so.
Pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
Hour and a half.
And we haven't even gotten to my favorite subject, physics.
Yeah, I know. We haven't even gotten. Well, I know you wanted to talk about black holes. Why don't we do something fun for a little while? Why don't we talk about black holes? So what is the big deal with this, with the box of donuts? I mean, the black hole picture. Why do people care?
It's a vindication of, there are two scientists that I consider personal demigods almost.
Okay.
So there are two scientists whose major predictions have never been shown to be wrong.
Right.
And here's an interesting story about one of them.
That's pretty impressive. I love predictions. That's where real science is. There's too many people focused on data.
So about 150 years ago, people were calculating the age of the Earth.
Right.
And it was either Lord Rayleigh or Lord Kelvin, one of the two. I forget who it was.
Okay.
He modeled the Earth as a ball of molten rock and calculated how long it would take to cool down to the surface temperature that it is today.
Okay.
And he came up with some number like in the millions of years.
Right.
And he published that.
Right.
A member of the Royal Society, Charles Darwin, said, impossible. Impossible.
Impossible!
There was not enough time for evolution.
Oh, interesting.
Guess who was right?
Darwin?
Natural radioactivity had not been discovered. That's what heats the Earth.
Oh, okay.
So when Henri Becquerel discovered natural radioactivity, and people realized a lot of stuff is radioactive, and a lot of it's in the Earth, and it's heating the Earth, that's what kept the Earth hotter than it should have been.
So the radioactivity is a missing piece of the equation.
That's right, and
that's what
Darwin was right.
Oh, Darwin was right.
Darwin was right.
Yes, nice. Darwin made some amazing predictions.
Almost none of them have been, all the major ones are correct.
And the funny, so this is exact, I just wrote an article, I have a bunch of scientific theories of my own, and I just wrote an article about the state of science, like a couple months ago, and I used Darwin as my golden child, so I'm really glad to hear that.
So, so in 1905...
You know, so many people take his data and they just, you know, like they'll take a page out of his book and they'll be like, oh, see, this proves that these people are inferior, or these animals are a waste of time or a dead end, and it's like, no, you have to look at the broader theory, which is that we're all one evolutionary tree. That's the real prediction.
Well, I think, and the other point is that the nature of purpose doesn't appear in evolution.
Right.
Evolution occurs because it does, not because of any purpose.
Right.
It's random.
Right.
And
yes, the Cthulhu reigns supreme.
So anyway, and so Einstein in 1905 wrote his papers, and the general relativity paper was among the last. And in it, and I was just telling this story to Tom earlier today, and Logan, who works for us. So he published his papers in 1905, and then like in 1911, this guy is in the foxholes in World War I, and he's calculating cannon trajectories.
Parabolas.
Right. And so, but it's extraordinarily difficult because, you know, a simple parabola gives you errors of like a half a mile.
Right.
So,
which doesn't kill anyone.
Right.
Just makes a pretty noise, pretty light and loud noise.
Right. So he's calculating trajectories, and in the middle of doing this is the apocryphal story. He calculates he solves Einstein's field equations for the first time ever. They're very difficult to solve, and he's the first one to come up with a solution. And it's easy. You plug the solution to the equation, and you check them.
Please excuse my French. Get the fuck out of here. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So
in the trenches in World War I.
Yeah,
Talk about working under pressure.
Right. Well, yeah.
And what was his name again?
His name is Schwarzschild.
Schwarzschild. Okay.
And Alfred.
Yeah.
Steve, you can look it up.
Google it. I'll Google it. It's fine.
Schwarzschild radius.
Google it, people. You all have to Google it.
Schwarzschild radius. So he calculates the first solutions to Einstein's field equations, and he discovers that there's at one certain point of gravitational attraction, there's an infinity. And Einstein looks at it and says, well, you know, there's no such thing. It can't be. Nature will find a way out of it. And 100 years later, nature didn't find a way out of it. There it is.
Carl Schwarzschild?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
So,
with a K.
Right, with a K. And so that radius is the radius you see in the picture.
Oh.
And since then, there have been several other solutions to Einstein's equations. But
so
also,
what exactly are people seeing with the light versus the darkness in the center, which I assume is the
so
singularity?
what you're looking at is essentially the brim of a hat. It's you're looking at as if you were looking at the top of a hat. So the black hole is the crown, and the brim is the
I'm
glowing
familiar
ring.
with the model where the gravity wells create dip into another
but what you're looking
a third
at,
dimension.
Right, but what you're looking at there is that well, as if you know that carnival game where you roll a penny down a funnel?
Yep.
Where you're looking at that well, what you're looking at is the pennies rolling around the outside. That's what the glowing ring is.
That's why the concentration of light on the outside.
Right, and it's slightly tilted so that the bright spot is closer to the Earth.
Oh, that's why we couldn't see it till now, because it was tilted to us.
No, it's slightly tilted. That's why one side is brighter than the other.
Oh, okay. Why couldn't we see it till now? What happened?
It's very, very far away.
It's very dim.
It's very, 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 very.
They had to
very
take a lot of pictures and make a composite, and
they took a lot of telescopes. The telescope's the size of the Earth.
Right.
They use many, many telescopes.
Right.
And they connect them all with atomic clocks.
Right.
And they synchronize the images using the clock timestamps. And the amount of data was so large from the observing sessions that they couldn't use the internet to send it to MIT, so they were actually delivered in hard drives.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, they're delivered hard
just like Amazon. No, sorry. Not picking on the cloud. Anyway.
And we have to give a shout out to the woman postdoc that wrote the routine to put the images together. I don't know her name, but Tom Canino, my CTO, told me that it was a woman postdoc. They interviewed her. But
nice.
It's a vindication. I don't think they're going to get a Nobel Prize because the colliding black holes were the proof of black holes, and those guys got the Nobel Prize.
Right. So it's not a proof, but it's another verification.
It's an observational proof.
Right.
But it's a direct.
And it was a prediction.
It's a direct observation. The colliding black holes are indirect observation.
So I'm sorry. I'm a little slow and childish. Carl Schwarzschild. Exactly what did he predict again? He was saying that this field.
There's a solution to your equations which has an infinity in it.
Which is an infinity, and the infinity was the singularity at the center.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So has there been any, I'm curious, is there any possibility that these are a personal pet theory of mine? I haven't had a chance to sit down with a physicist, so this sounds stupid. Please forgive me, because we've had such a great intellectual conversation where my ego has been rubbed. I'm going to the fear.
I don't think there are really any stupid questions.
So, it seems to me that we have no way to know for sure until we're closer, observationally speaking, to know. I mean, of course, we have these predictions. This is actually making me question. This is why I'm asking this. There's a possibility that some of the black holes are actually wormholes, and we don't know what's on the other side, and that maybe that there's some physical property on the other side of the wormhole that we don't understand, which is why things are sucked through it.
A wormhole requires one part of space to be connected to another part of space.
Right.
So the black hole is a hole in space,
maybe
but
possibly in another universe.
Well, yes, right. A lot of
different
people,
rules.
Yeah, right. A lot of people think that, but a black hole is actually a puncture in space. It doesn't. So there's nothing on the other side, so to speak.
Well, I'm not going first, so I wasn't even. I was never confident enough to even consider that. But
so here's the problem, and it's a problem that bothers quantum physicists as well.
Right.
The problem is that. There's information that we have, the arrangement of atoms in our body, our entropy, the color of your hair, and all sorts of other stuff that goes along with us.
Organization of the molecules.
But the only thing that a black hole has is charge, spin, and mass.
Right.
So what happened to all that other information?
Right.
So that's a very simple way of looking at it.
Right.
And quantum mechanics argues that can't be true. So the two worlds, the worlds of quantum mechanics and worlds of general relativity, don't really line up quite just yet. So that
we're not there. String theories come close, but we're not right there.
I have personal bias against string theory, but
please,
for no apparent
rip it
reason.
apart. No, okay.
Well, I mean, the couple of things you hear is that inside the black hole, all those extra 23 dimensions that are required by string theory, they're all in there.
Yes.
So it sort of obviates the fact that it's a singularity, that there's no space or time or.
And of course, you have this thing with dark particles coming out of them too, which doesn't really.
Nobody knows what they are, but small black holes evaporate, but large ones keep growing.
Right.
Now there are fundamental questions here that are again deeply mysterious. So. When black holes were originally thought to be real, Hawking and so on, it's Hawking radiation that causes a black hole to explode.
Right.
So when they're too small, What happens?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Hawking radiation is like does the Hawking radiation increase as the mass of the singularity increases? Is that
No,
how
as it goes
works?
down.
Oh, as it goes down.
So-
then of course it will evaporate. That you're talking
The small ones,
you're talking
the
about
small
the
ones,
evaporation.
the small ones evaporate. Small black holes evaporate.
Evaporate equals explode. Got it.
Yeah. So what happens is that a particle starts streaming towards a small black hole and accelerates until finally it creates what's called a virtual pair out of the vacuum.
Right.
But now.
I mean, of course, it's going to break down to quarks as it gets close enough.
No, but what happens is it's got a momentum going in,
Right.
So the virtual pair has to conserve momentum. So the particle going into the black hole is carrying extra momentum. So the other one has to go back out. So it's going to carry away some energy from the black hole, the energy that the black hole used to create the particles. So when it's small enough, the black hole explodes.
Or that's just the outdoor on the wormhole. No.
So
Yeah.
So anyway, and then in the 20s or 1930 or so, an Indian physicist, Chandrasekhar, everybody was all excited about all the stuff. Einstein thought the black holes didn't exist and nature was going to find a way. And then Chandrasekhar came along and said, if you get this amount of mass in a lump, like a collapsed neutron star,
Yeah.
it will continue to collapse further into a black hole.
Right.
And that limit is the Chandrasekhar limit is now a known limit. And you do calculations based on these kinds of
And
numbers.
what was the name of that limit again? It was a
Chandrasekhar. It's a common Indian name.
car limit. Okay.
think
That one I don't know. I'm going to look
Yeah,
at
that was in 1930. I think
Okay.
that's the limit. And what's interesting is that Robert Oppenheimer had also calculated some of these quantities as well in the 40s and later, and they, for instance, calculated the radius that would be required of a gravitational field to capture a photon and make it travel in orbit around the gravity. And it turns out that radius was exactly equal to the one that Pierre Laplace had calculated 200 years earlier.
That's spectacular when that happens.
He said, just as a mathematical curiosity, what is the gravitational field necessary so that the orbital velocity is the speed of light? So it turns out to be the same.
It's an unintentional proof. Oops, I found an identity.
So yeah, it's sort of funny. But
funny.
yes, and it's but the scientists that announced the discovery said that science is going to be known as before April 10th and after April 10th.
April 10th,
Yesterday.
2019.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's how strongly they feel this is.
This prediction has unequivocally come true, even though someone already won the Nobel for proving it came true.
Yes, right. And again, it's an indirect proof, but
So they are not without a sense of irony, but they are not incorrect either.
Maybe the Nobel Committee gives them an award too. I don't know. I doubt it, but who knows?
That seems like a shame.
Yeah. But it was an extraordinary feat. But now, it's. Again, it's a vindication of all. There are many competing theories of general relativity that agree with Einstein's equations, but don't match his model.
Right.
And so these can now be tested, and you can throw them out.
Right.
His theories held up. The global the GPS system now uses general relativity corrections for military use to make corrections to positions, on the centimeter scale.
Oh, okay.
Depending on how much gravity the radio waves are seeing.
How much distortion there is on the radio waves
in space.
Right.
How much distortion is in space.
Right.
As the radio waves travel.
Right.
So because gravity is different. I mean,
it changes time slightly, right?
It changes. Well. So now the distance between 2 points is defined as a straight line, but in a curved space, a straight line is not straight as we know it.
Right.
In the inside of the glass, a straight line is this.
Right.
On the Earth, a straight line is a great circle. It's not a hole drilled through the Earth.
Right.
And people seem to know that on the Earth, but don't accept it out in space.
Don't tell the flat earthers.
Well,
Oh, hate mail.
Carl Gauss knew this as well. In fact, the curvature of space is known as Gaussian curvature.
Yeah.
So Carl Gauss knew this as well, and he said, how do we know that space is flat? How do we know the Pythagorean theorem is true at big distances? So in fact, he actually flashed lights from mountaintop to mountaintop to try and see if the distances, if the sum of the squares of the sides of a right triangle.
What year was this? This was
18 something or other.
Oh, okay, right, okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he knew that, you know, if you change the sign of the Pythagorean
Now you're just looking at a plane, people. Come on.
Right.
Fly across the Pacific. Do the math ahead of time. Get back to me.
But you know, the Pythagorean theorem, the distance of the hypotenuse is x squared plus y squared. But what happens if you change it to x squared minus y squared? You know, just a different mathematical space. Well, then you have a hyperbola.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
So it's
been a while.
Yeah. So at big distances, is it flat? Is it a hyperbola?
Right.
Does space have an end? And you know, the funny little clip that the guy Shep Doleman from Harvard, who announced the discovery, or maybe it was the New York Times, Dennis Overby. He said, if you were standing at that photon radius, the minimum photon radius, and you looked out, now that black hole, the center of that black hole, that's the size of our solar system.
Pull down your shirt just a little bit. So then, like where your mic is. Oh, there you go.
The center, our solar system.
All right, I'll get wild there.
Our solar system fits into that black disk.
Yeah.
So light takes probably a few minutes to travel around that whole expanse. So if you were sitting on the edge of that rim of that orbit and you looked, what you would see was the back of your head.
Right. Yeah.
And since light takes a fair amount of time to travel around that loop.
Well, when would you see your head though?
Immediately.
Immediately. Oh,
well, okay. I mean, no, it would take time for it to travel around, but once it traveled around, you'd see it continuously. Just a delay.
Just whatever the speed of light times
the circumference.
Circumference.
Right. So of course, if you turned around, you would see your face.
Whoa. Of course, what we're not saying is that you'd be ripped to shreds when you even got anywhere near that.
No, at the photon orbit, you'd be okay.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought that was past the singularity.
I think that's
past that event horizon, I meant.
The event horizon.
That's where you can't see anything anymore.
You pass right through the event horizon without even knowing it. But what happens is if you turn around, you'd see it'd be very, very bright, I think, because all the light.
Or would you just keep passing through the event horizon forever?
No. But it does take you quite a long time.
Right.
But then you rip to shreds.
Right.
As you get to near the singularity.
No. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting. That's different than how I thought it was.
Yeah, I think it's misstated, I think, in the New York Times article. But you pass the event horizon, you probably wouldn't notice it.
So I'm glad you brought that up. So does that lower your faith in the press now that you've seen an error like that? Is it because it's so hard to do?
No. I didn't, reading the New York Times for science articles is not the best way to get science.
It's just a way to get the headline, and then you go look it up yourself.
I mean, most of it.
I'm not picking on the Times.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the person who wrote that is going to be writing about a science fair another day. So
No, but it's Dennis Overby. He's a pretty good science writer, and it's just I mean, I guess maybe there's some disagreement about what nobody's ever been to an event horizon, so I guess there might be some disagreement about what you'd see.
Right.
But yeah, there's no. It's only near the black, near the singularity itself, that the gravity gets so strong that the pull on your feet is millions of times greater than the pull on your head.
Right.
And you get ripped apart.
Yeah, there was. I've forgotten. I keep forgetting the darn name of this, but there was. There's actually a social effect where a person who reads an article of something where they're a specialist in, and they read it, and they're like, "Oh, this is completely riddled with errors. I hate this," and then they just turn to the next page and assume everything is true. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the reason I was asking about that, and I find that happening a lot because I have a few things that I know a lot about, and I go, "Oh, yeah, that's really interesting."
Right. I know.
Wait a minute.
I remember once I read something that had an error in it, and my brother's a physician, and so I mentioned to him. I said, "You don't read any of your medical articles. It's like you don't get any medical information from the medical stories, right?" And so some of the physics stories are a little bit off.
And I think it's forgivable to a point. The thing I worry about is retractions. Right. Because of course retractions are never the thing that drives eyeballs, and this is something I think blockchain maybe could fix. The thing that drives eyeballs is the excitement, the buzz, the I gotta go check this out, but the problem is the buzz is gone. It's spent. The emotional energy that drives human beings to learn is gone. And then the realization that the mistake was made comes, and the retraction comes. And not only is it not at the same level of visibility, even if they were looking for it, which they're not, but it's on page 50.
Yeah.
So everyone assumes the lie is the truth.
Right.
Now, of course, it sounds innocent, but is it? Maybe sometimes it isn't, you know.
Right.
You know, sometimes for sure it's innocent sometimes. But
the National Enquirer.
you have a happy accident a few times, you know, like a kid that discovers a hole in their parents' security, and they're like, oh, I can get away with this all the time. I'm never going to go to bed on time now, you know.
Right. Yeah, like the National Enquirer model, you know, just publish what you think and
then let people yell at you, and then maybe you'll fix it later.
Right. Although I, you know, back when it was a little bit more, you know, more about the alien boy and all that other stuff, those reporters actually thought that they were pretty good because they were getting stories nobody else could get. They thought they were they thought they were great reporters.
Right. Really.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I mean, good for them.
Right.
You know, nothing like being self-affirmed.
Right. But you know,
I got a participation trophy.
No, but it's you know, I guess it's changed its tone. I can't tell you that I've ever read an issue of the National Enquirer.
Yeah.
But it is for sale now.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I have not read the Enquirer either. I have occasionally looked at articles, and at worst, I would use it as a headline indicator to look the headline up in other places.
Right.
Just like we were discussing using the Times. So.
Right.
Okay. So I'm curious to what. Yeah, it would really. You know, it just would be nice. Again, talking about that custody problem. You know, what's the truth? You know, it really would be nice to see retractions flattened with headlines.
Right.
You know, I would just, and then that way, you know, we could realize the potential of, you know, the failed potential of the TV and the possible potential of the internet, where you can use these mediums, and the fact that anyone, I mean, like I made a cartoon for this show, and it sounds stupid, but it's not, because I was able to explain it. I tried to explain to people what a technocracy was, like 30, 40, 50 times. I made a cartoon, no one asked again.
Right. Yeah.
Because you know, it's very powerful if used responsibly.
Right.
So I would love to see some kind of system of flattening retractions with original stories, so that you had to use it responsibly, or your reputation would fall. Maybe as a currency.
Right. But part of the problem there is that the retraction has to occur at some later date. Right? You have to find your mistake. And
well, the thing is, because it would be on a blockchain, when you look the original story up, all the retractions would come crowding in. And you'd be forced to look at all of them at the flat level,
and
there would be no denying it because it's on a blockchain and it's immutable.
Right.
Anyway, just throwing that out there if you're feeling bored.
What I was thinking about when I was being bored was incorporating a blockchain into QuickBooks.
Ah, okay.
QuickBooks has a large user base, so there are your nodes.
Right. Oh, okay. I like that.
Right. QuickBlock.
So what would be the what would be the shared data set?
The ledgers.
The ledgers. Okay. Do you think people would be willing to share their QuickBooks ledgers with?
But you wouldn't.
Well, nonprofits could. Nonprofits. Yes, that would be a perfect model.
You wouldn't know whose transaction it was unless you knew their address.
Right. But even forget about the possibility of leakage. Why even take the chance?
Or charities.
No, charities will get more donations. I mean, it's just fact. They'll get more donations the more open they are with their books.
Right.
So if you put your books out there, you're going to make more money just by participating.
Right.
Oh, that's a good incentive structure. I like that. Good thinking.
You have your.
What are you, smart or something?
You have your programming tools out.
Yeah.
Which IDE do you use?
Yeah.
Here's my IDE insight.
Right.
Why did Eclipse call itself Eclipse?
I don't know.
I think it was competing with Sun Microsystems.
Oh, yeah, you're right. You're totally right. That was a marketing decision.
I really think that's true.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. That's crazy. I never realized that before.
Yeah. I said, why is it called Eclipse? Why would anybody name an IDE Eclipse? I said, aha.
Yeah.
Aha.
It's a wordplay.
That's right.
It's a come and get us over the castle wall.
Where is Sun Microsystems these days?
What is the land speed of a swallow?
Right.
Oh, they're dead. They're dead. They blew it. They had. They were on top. They had every opportunity to switch to open source, which they did, but they did it too slowly, and they dragged their feet too much.
Well, Java is going to become closed source soon. You have
It
to pay.
is?
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think.
That sucks. That seems like an Oracle decision.
Yeah, look at your latest update little message. It says pretty soon.
Oracle was pushing their Unbreakable Linux really hard, and we were like, no, we don't trust you, and we were right, because if they're going to close Java, then you definitely couldn't trust Unbreakable Linux.
You know, there's a Linux military distribution.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I knew there was a Chinese official one.
no, it's
Red Flag Linux was
well, this is Red Hat got contracted by the military to make a. This is.
okay.
I used to work at Techtronix, a military
not
supplier.
know this?
Well, it's not. It wasn't public knowledge, and you can't get a distribution
Wait,
of it.
is this illegal
No,
knowledge?
it's not illegal.
Okay.
No, you can look it. You can look it up. Steve, could you do me a favor? Just look up FBCB2.
Steve, leave him alone.
FBCB2.
Right.
BC, okay.
All right, what do I know about it?
You can read the little blurb.
Force 21 Battle Command Brigade, and below is a Linux-based communication platform designed for the commanders to track friendly and hostile forces on the battlefield.
That is really interesting, because I actually knew I knew someone at B&L who was saying that they were using Windows machines and Windows networking at field offices, field tents, to keep track of data and stuff. So they must have switched. In the Marines, at least. It's not Army.
No, they didn't. Because I'll tell you why, and I don't think this is classified. I'll tell you why. FBCB2.
I don't think this is classified. Famous last words.
I don't.
Want some more wine now? Keep going.
What kind of distribution do you get on this?
A couple hundred people.
So, FBCB2 is meant for vehicles.
Okay.
So the first thing you have to do actually is put in a vehicle code before it even boots.
Oh, okay.
So, but it's an interesting thing. It tracks good guys and bad guys and has map overlays.
So I mean, this is like, in your defense, DARPA was the one that blew the whistle on the telematic systems in people's cars, because they were freaking out, because these car companies are not taking security in their cars seriously, and it is a risk of a systemic terrorist attack if somebody broke into all the cars. And actually, it was a week or two ago, Toyota announced they are open sourcing all their car hacking stuff.
Right. It should be open source.
It really should be, because otherwise, how are you going to have classic cars? That's the part that bugs the crap. Aside from the terrorist stuff, which it could be, we all could just die, or a city could be immobilized.
Right.
But also, how the hell are you going to have classic cars? If these cars aren't just junk, they're not just throwaway appliances, and I want to rebuild 2014, how the hell am I going to do it? Because they're going to stop making the modules, and the damn thing won't run.
One of my
you have to throw a carburetor in there.
One of the guys that belongs to my pool and tennis club is a car enthusiast, and he always buys a gray market chip for his cars to.
Right. Well, but of course, then you depend on the gray market company too. So.
Yeah, he's doing it just to remove the emission controls. And Get the revs higher.
Yeah, but even then, like, how do you, if your whole car is just a big network of computers talking to each other, they all expect a certain thing, and they freak out if you don't give it to them.
The real downside, of course, is you have to pay the service station technician to ignore the emissions when he pull the thing out of the tailpipe when he does it.
Right. Well, it's all the computer has to give a ready code, which of course is just incredibly stupid.
Right.
Because in the semi-compliant states, we have highly compliant states like New York and California where they actually pursue this stuff, and then you have the states which are kind of like, yeah, we're playing the emissions game, and they really don't. They don't care, and everybody just puts stubs on everything, and they always read okay, and that's it. Like, yep, I'm ready. And, which is worse than if they had just left it more conservative and had less sensors and less rigor.
Right.
Yeah, I really think we need to dial back the car emission controls 10 years or 15 years, because we're getting to the point that they're not safe anymore. Ford's not making cars. What other signs do you need?
Unless we have electric cars in 20 years.
That would be good. But and I'll retract that when 50% of Ford's vehicles are back to cars and they're electric. But so far, no.
So for a while, I had dual boot Windows FBCB2 on a little portable battlefield computer.
Really?
Yeah, it was pretty
just to muck around with, or
no. It was designed to go in the field.
Okay.
The company went bust, but
okay. Oh, it was part of a. Okay, I got it.
It was a project, but
right.
But actually, yeah, it was some of the projects were sort of fun. One was I designed their network attached storage, and you should have seen this Rube Goldberg device. It was 2 hard drives with, you had to shim it with a sheet of paper. You know,
Sounds
the
like a
old
laptop.
the old hard drives with the heads and the platters and you know.
Right.
And this is meant to go into a Humvee. You know, like in Iraq or Afghanistan. These things, so the thing is bouncing around. Of course, the heads are parked every time it bounces.
Yeah.
And since it was secure, when you close the drive door, the head had to park, and there's something in there that moved a platter up against something else to close the door, and it had to be shimmed with a piece of paper. I mean, that's how. And then it was supposed to go into a vehicle and
to let it know that it was safe, that it could.
I don't even know what it was. And so they said this has to be redesigned so it's more reliable. I said I'm not redesigning this thing with like mechanical Rube Goldberg stuff. Forget it. And so I bought a $110 single board computer that ran Linux. Two $3,000 solid state drives, 1 gigabyte each.
Yeah.
That's because they were just new coming out.
Right.
Couple of SATA connectors. Put it all together in a little box and said, "Here you go," and ran.
And they were probably more secure for it.
They were fine. They were perfect.
Yeah.
And
ever since they've used the other ones for armor plating.
I don't know what they use them for.
Stick it right in the vest.
But this thing, you know, it survives the shake table. It does everything. You know, the bad part about it is the connectors.
It's
the
useless.
connectors kept coming.
You know, one bad connector, and if you can't get parts for it.
Right. So that was, in my design, that was the
whole industry's done that. They've all realized that you just did. What's the point of using commodity if you can't throw it away?
Right.
You know, if it isn't eminently replaceable.
Right. So it turns out these solid state drives were new on the market, new flash drives, and so they were like, I don't know, $8,000 a piece or something or other. So they said, but look, you're gonna spend all that money, but you're gonna get it back again because you're not gonna have to shim and do all these tweaking on these things. You're just gonna throw these things in a box and sell them. And of course, what happened is the flash drive prices came way down, and the price of the module stayed the same.
Yes.
So that was good, but actually SpaceX had inquired as well about that device. Yeah, but like I said, the company went out of business.
Right.
So that was a little bit of a feather in my cap. SpaceX was interested in flying.
Nice. Yeah. You got the Musk tap, huh?
Yeah. I only got word that they made an inquiry. Nobody contacted me.
Right.
So, but that was sort of interesting. But now, of course, you know, you buy a flash drive at the Apple Store.
Right.
So.
Oh yeah. I mean, all my stuff.
Everybody's right. Yeah. Nobody uses.
I don't even buy. You know, like it has to be. I'll do backup. So I'm a major geek, so I have tiered storage. So my last tier is spinning hard drives, but for the most part, everything else is SSD. Because why? Right. You know, when it's that cheap, you just if it starts getting too big, you just tear it off, set it off, and okay, I'm back to a workable space again.
Right. But that was sort of fun. But then that was but the FBCB2 stuff was sort of interesting because it's got, you can actually sort of track good guys and bad guys. But who knows how well it works? I have no idea.
Right. Well, you're not dead.
Right.
It was a war zone, or Iraq was a war zone for many years.
I didn't go over there.
Oh, you didn't go over there.
No, okay. I took part.
Never mind then.
I did take part in what was it called? The joint operations out in some desert space out in Nevada, which is basically for EU and allied forces to simulate a battlefield and communicate with each other.
Right.
And boy, if you had to trust to that system, forget it. Just hide in the foxhole or whatever.
Right. So what was wrong with it? I mean,
everybody has their own protocols, right? And so you have to have the correct login and all this other stuff. And
right. So you've just been sitting there futzing with the technology for so long, and meanwhile people are dying, and the Wilhelm scream is repeating itself.
You have the British guys over. You have the British guys over here, and you have the American guys over here, and you have coalition forces over there, and they all have their own radios. They all have their own headsets, and everything about that whole military system, I didn't work on this, but we had a guy that was designing FPGAs for the radios,
right,
for the communication systems, and all it had to do was push to talk. So you want to talk to channel 1, push channel 1, talk channel, and they could never get it to work for some reason or other. I have no idea why it seemed so difficult.
It's bizarre.
And and mute and talk to everybody in the Humvee, talk to the navigator, talk to the co-pilot, talk to the gunner, or mute everybody.
It seems like they should have just had sent someone in a pickup truck to go to a camping store.
Well, no, this is all in one Humvee.
Right. No, but I'm saying they should have said, all right, go, we'll cover for you. Just drive to the nearest sports store 2 countries over and just buy a pallet of normal CBs and just...
Well, the problem is that you can catch those over the air.
Right, of course.
So
go back to Enigmas.
Right. So you know what the soldiers did though? Right. Actually, in the field. They would take their this is iPod days, right? So they would take their iPod, and they would take the speaker wire and cut it out, and cut one of the wires to the headphones, one ear of the headphone, and they'd wire the iPod to that speaker on the headphone.
Oh, so they can actually hear it.
They're having music at one and comms in the other.
Oh, cool. Nice. That's really
funny.
Yeah, that is funny.
Right. So it was different out in the field than what you actually designed.
I can't believe it. We went through all the topics. I only have one thing left that I wanted to ask you, and then I want to give you the floor and let you say if there's anything you want to say. I wanted to ask you: are you a sci-fi fan? Do you know who David Brin is?
No.
So David Brin is a sci-fi writer, but like sometimes sci-fi writers get it right, and make predictions of their own. And so he wrote this thing called Transparent Society, where he was essentially saying that cameras are going to be everywhere and privacy is dead.
Right.
Who's kind of a prophet in that space, and it certainly looks like it's going that way to me. So especially for people looking at the Internet of Things, of course this does not apply to your product at all, but in the Internet of Things space this is a big deal. They just found a microphone in the Nest thermostats, and everyone's like, why is there a microphone in here?
And there's a camera in the video display of some airplanes.
Right. So my contention is, David Brin's contention is, privacy's dead, get over it. My version, this is why you can tell I'm not a libertarian, is a little more subtle than that, which is that I think that property is like an inherent human right. Now you can argue about what property you have a right to, but that you have a right to some kinds of property because it gives you the ability to make do some kind of planning for yourself, and that when you're in the space of your own property, then you have a right to privacy. But when you're in the public, when you're in the commons, that you don't.
Right.
So I don't know if you agree with that, or do you have your own philosophy?
I think the legal principle. My wife's the attorney. I'm not. But I think the legal principle is that if you're
moral, screw legal.
Yeah, but
slaves were illegal. Who cares about legal?
But based on people's collective experience, is that if you're out in public, there is no expectation of privacy.
Right. Yes. Yeah, okay.
So the picture of the sailor kissing the woman in Times Square at the end of the war.
Yep.
They don't get a dime from that.
Right.
They're in public space. The photographer took the picture.
Keep it in your pants.
He owns the picture, and they never got a dime. And so that's true. However, the downside is we were asked to bid through Infosys on a project for Grand Central Terminal to count people in the terminal. And on my desk I have a little radar that could do just that, can do people counting. It doesn't recognize faces, but it does people counting. And that's a new, amazing technology. The thing is this big, sits on my desk, and it'll count people in a room. Right. And there's no spinning dish or anything. It's just all on a circuit board.
Wow. Just through echolocation or variations of it?
No. It's got 9. It's got like 4 transmitting antennas and 16 receive antennas. And so you know how phased array radar works?
Oh yeah, kind of.
So you do the
maybe they don't. So go ahead.
So you change so if you have 2 beams of waves coming out like that, they don't touch each other. They're fine. But if they go like that, and the crests are in phase, they'll amplify. They'll add.
Right. The power will increase.
Right. So now if you
just like resonating when you sing. Right. People sing and it gets louder.
Right.
If they're on key.
Right. So when you change the phase of one, so that they're no longer in phase. They're like this. But what happens is somewhere else on the side they're in phase. So you can steer it Just by
okay.
You can steer the beam just by changing the phase of the different emitters, right? So that's
8.
Right. So that's called a phased array radar, and that's
Right.
what they use. And then the receiving antennas detect the reflection from, and the angle is known by how you phase the transmitting antennas.
Right.
So anyway, we were asked to do this thing for Grand Central Terminal. I said, okay, great. I have a people counting radar that we can use, and I have a guy up in Massachusetts that's interested in collaborating on some of these projects, and he does a lot of work like this. So he says, oh, great, yeah, we've been working on some facial recognition software. Grand Central Terminal never contacted us again, so I don't know. I think the proposal fell through. But I was thinking about it. I'm not really sure whether I wanted to work with him on catching everybody's face in Grand Central Terminal.
You mean that you are a moral technocrat? My goodness.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I would be comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's borderline. It's sketchy. Well, on the one hand, okay, so I can make an argument for or against, right? For, I mean, knowing how many people there are, let's say if you know how many people are in each room, you may be able to roughly track the movements of people. Maybe you could stop a terrorist attack. Maybe you know where to send the police. Maybe you know when you reach, you can predict when, like do a delta kind of on the number of people in there when there's an event and the trains aren't running, and before it becomes a stampede, you can stop it and start ushering people out. On the other hand, you can do that with your eyeballs too. So
yeah,
on the downside, Big Brother would never use that for evil.
Right. The human observer is much better at it than the computer observer.
At some point, that won't be true, though.
Again, that's probably correct, but I think right now I don't know where that's going to shake out. But I was uncomfortable with the notion of capturing everybody's face and motion in Grand Central Terminal.
So why were you uncomfortable with it? I'm curious. I mean, I can imagine, but
because I wouldn't like it to be known of me, as walking along and everybody says, "Oh, there goes Arnie," and
right.
It's just you have the feeling like somebody's looking over your shoulder.
Right. Once the data's there, if the data's there and ripe for the plucking, it seems like just a single political wave could change it from a benign use to a devilish one.
Well, right. I mean, yeah, there's no morality to data, but...
but I mean, the availability, it's easy when politicians want to do something wrong, and you can just say, well, we can't do that. We don't know how to do it. So if you can do it...
Right. So there's this notion in physics of phase transitions, and, you can... if you watch frost on a window take shape, or you breathe on it and the ice crystals go away, it grows spontaneously. It only requires that initial spark, and then it grows spontaneously by itself because of interactions among the players in the field, and that's the ice molecules or whatever.
Right.
So, when Facebook and Microsoft did this study, what's going to engage people the most? Well, just call them names, right?
Right.
And that engages them. They fight back.
Right.
If you say, I think you're pleasant and beautiful, half the time you get ignored.
Right.
Right? But if I said you're a racist, you're a white supremacist or whatever, somebody writes back, says, yes, I am. Fuck you. And,
Right. That's a huge problem happening right now.
Right. That generates,
people are being incited to the thing that we fear.
So the Microsoft experiment was one day. Right, because the best way to generate engagement was to insult people.
Right.
So the goal...
They gave it a problem and it solved it.
Yeah, right. The goal was the wrong goal.
So in case you don't know what we're talking about, Microsoft wrote an artificial intelligence, if you want to call it that, it was an attempt at a legitimate artificial intelligence, so not just stupid machine learning, and it pretty quickly figured out how to achieve its goal. And one of the ways to do that, to engage people, was to be insulting.
Right.
Because you got better, just like a child
you got better
does
response.
the same thing. You don't get a better response. Like, wow, look at their face now. I must be winning.
That's right. Right.
If I'd only had a conscience.
Why is this baby crying?
Yeah.
So and so it's asking the wrong question. Your human interactions, I think, and so now you see that now, and I think. Look, I think the simple answer for Facebook and Google and whatever is if you want to post something, post it under your real name. But they're not going to do that because they're going to lose eyeballs.
Right.
Right. If there were a requirement to authenticate yourself,
right,
you'd never see this.
Well, here's the funny thing: the joke's on them, because one of the things we've talked about here on the show before is anonymity is a temporary state.
Right.
What most people don't understand is anonymity is it's a strategy but it's not an objective. It's a temporary. It's an offensive strategy. That's what I mean to say. Anonymity is an offensive strategy, and the reason why is because anytime you have an encrypted session, if you can man in the middle and gather the session, all you have to do is wait, and as the encryption technology goes,
right,
the technology that used to be safe will no longer will, and then they can read whatever you're doing.
Right.
So you're only anonymous for now, and the life cycle of encryption is significantly shorter than a human lifespan. So you're crazy if you think you're really anonymous.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of a aside from that, but I think that human behavior. I think the reason I know why the Microsoft experiment failed. I think because what we think of as intelligence is partly behavioral, and I think the fact that we tend to trust each other by default, kind of, sort of, not always, not everything, but we kind of default to trust, and I think that's one of the things that makes humans unique from the animal kingdom. It used to be like, oh, we use tools, which we know is total bullshit now. There's plenty of animals that use tools, but it's the fact that we actually, and there's this demonstrable scientific learning. This is where part of my science theory comes from. Unique to humans and dogs. We'll get to that another time, but only humans and dogs is the learning triangle. You point at something, and a human being will assume that you're trying to help them, particularly a child, right? Because you have to use a child, because otherwise the intelligence levels are too different. And dogs will too, and they're the only ones. A monkey understands what a point means, but they don't know that they don't trust you.
I've heard the opposite about dogs, and I tried it when my dog was alive. I tried it on him.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. And I've heard the opposite, that dogs do not follow a point, and but pointers obviously do. So they're on the cusp, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think if they do have a conscience, it's because we bred it into them.
Right. So
it's not like, and of course, whenever you see the thing is, of course, what people come back at me with is, oh, well, animals are clearly very kind because this picture of a bear and a deer, and I'm like, yeah, well, what do they have in common? It's a human, and that's always the case. Whenever you see altruism in animals, it's either just a random coincidence where two behaviors align.
It's an anomaly. It's just an anomaly,
or human beings are present.
Right. I don't think kindness doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah. Except with people, for some.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, altruism intra-species, intra-clan is true, I think.
Well, I mean,
wolves, for instance.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
But there's another thing too with that, which is that wolves. What are wolves, bees, naked mole rats, ants? What do they have in common? They're all family.
Right, they're social animals.
Yeah. So it's actually just a big family. The mammals tend to be a little less true, right? They tend to be more mating involved, and they may not be direct.
But I think, the nature of artificial intelligence now is probably similar to the nature of computer language abilities, maybe 10 or 20 years ago. All the computer scientists said, we'll have computers understanding language, in 10 years, and it's never going to happen because there's some fundamentals that are missing. Well, I mean, it's getting better, but there are fundamentals that are missing. And one of my experiments that I intend to try at some point before it gets too advanced and the experiment will fail would be to, for instance,
Bell experiments are good too. It's good data.
No. It will fail because Google will have thwarted my experiment before I get a chance to try it. And that is to take a standard English sentence, translate it to French, translate it back into English, translate it to French, translate it back into English, and see how long it takes, how many cycles before it's gibberish. I say it's like 3.
Right.
I say it's about 3.
Well, it's almost like a variation of the Turing test.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard that before anywhere?
The Turing test?
No, the test that you just...
No, it's my test.
That's Arnie's test. Yeah. That's the Arnie test. Yeah, you know what? I mean, that might be...
Steve, let's try it.
I think you may have just coined your own version of the...
I take song lyrics, run it through 7 different languages, and then bring it back. It doesn't happen, but... What do you want me to test? What do you want me to write?
The quick red fox jumps over the lazy brown
Oh, come on, they might have a short cover for that one. No, it's good.
That's what I use for the nonce in my Bitcoin talk.
While you're torturing Steve, I have poor Steve. Sorry, man. I didn't sign up for this. I'm like, hey, I want to have a show of the Technocrat. They're like, yeah, that sounds great. And then we come on here and we're talking physics. They're like, what did we do?
So this was done by Mark Twain, by the way.
Oh.
Hey, you know the song, the story, the celebrated jumping frog in Calaveras County?
no.
There's a bet. These two guys are having a bet on which jumping frog will jump the furthest.
Oh, okay.
And while one guy's got his head turned, the cheater pours a bunch of lead shot into the frog that's supposed to jump.
Oh, okay.
So the frog, all he can do is glumph, and he can't jump at all.
Right.
So he wins the bet. So Mark Twain took that story, translated it into French, and translated it from French back to English again.
Right.
And it is hilarious. It's hard to read without laughing after 2 or 3 sentences.
So on the one hand, this is a great defense of atheism. On the other, because everything's been translated at least once. On the other hand, this is also a great defense of monotheism, because it also has been, it's an excuse and a reasoning.
I was correct. 3 is the answer.
No, after 3 chances, it says the fast brown fox jumped over the lazy dog.
Oh, so it's more than 3. See, I told you, Google's going to be...
Literally after the second, hold on. After the second attempt, it just stayed the same.
Right.
And it just didn't change at all. So like that's why if
it went to an equilibrium.
Yeah. So that's why if I bring it into like I do usually jump between languages. Like I go to like French, then to German, then to Spanish, then to like and I go.
So this is something you may not know. In the software world, there's something where you can run a script over and over. It's known as idempotency, and this is actually a big deal right now with all the computer geeks, and they're trying to make all their systems idempotent.
Right.
So I bet if you had tried that 2 years ago, it probably would have worked.
Right. And now
Google's made it idempotent. Right. And they're like, ah!
Oh, he just ran that. He just ran that. Let me do it again.
Well, no. That it actually, the algorithm itself is capable of rewriting over itself over and over and over again.
Right.
Because if it was a cheat like that, then it wouldn't truly be idempotent.
Right.
Although if you caught them in that, I bet you could mock them publicly.
Although I think, but you know, it's looking for stock translations of that sentence, right? So if we use a sentence that's very uncommon, a nonsense sentence, that might. Well, I'll have to try.
I mean, that's like the typing. That's the typing class sentence, right? Yeah.
Whatever that. I don't know. I never took typing, and I'm a terrible typist. But we'll have to try that with a sentence that's not particularly well known.
So those were great answers about the Bryn question, and I really appreciate you chiming in on that. And actually, I just wanted to share like a quick thing. So I know that the city at one point recently was running. This will be quick. A test against RFIDs, and they were using people's RFID tags in their Easy Passes to figure out traffic patterns. Now, on the one hand, there could be total benign uses for it. On the other hand, it doesn't take a lot of imagination to see how a speed calculation could turn into a ticket later on down the line.
Right.
So, and of course, we know how that works, and as a contrary point, like we could put stuff on our faces to manipulate the cameras so that we're anonymous. We can control our own destiny because we're technocrats.
Right.
And I know enough to take my Easy Pass and shove it in a Mylar bag and put it, in the center console and actually and run an RFID reader by it to make sure it's working. And okay, I can't read it anymore.
That's the shoplifter's trick.
Right. So, but. I'm shoplifting my car through the city, but nobody else knows that. So what's the morality of being in this situation where these technocrats know exactly what's going on and how to manipulate the system, and the vast majority of people are just walking around clueless, victims with their RFID tags sitting in their wallets, getting scanned as people walk by them in a busy city.
But you know what I think happens in cases like that is if the technology stays around long enough, kids end up playing with it and they take over. They learn it very quickly.
Okay.
If you notice, like
so children of the future is what you're saying.
Well, infants. How does a 3-year-old know to swipe on a cell phone?
Because I gave him a cell phone at 3.
But who showed them?
They just tried everything and then something worked.
But who showed them? Right, nobody shows them.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books is a book called The Language Instinct, because it's like a little hobby of mine for a while, was linguistics.
Gone so much further with this.
And so it's written by Steven Pinker, who writes like a genius, and the London Economist says he writes like an angel. But so he wrote this book called The Language Instinct, and I
would hope so with the name like The Language Instinct.
And I was haranguing people about it for years to read it. But he points out that it's a spontaneous thing. It doesn't require children to learn anything. They do it automatically as long as there are other children around. And in fact, they don't learn language from adults. And And the number of words you acquire once you start speaking is 1 every half hour until you're like 16 years old.
I think it's 100,000 for
until you're 16 years old. You just do the hours and the words.
Yep. Sometimes you can tell a teacher's kid because they have the big multisyllabic language set.
But it's how much effort is put into that? Zero.
Right. Yep.
Zero effort is put into that.
Give me your turn.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to definitely read that. I'm super interested in that. That seems like it would be right up my alley. I read a weird assortment of technological, economics, and marketing books. Science books.
I can throw you all the books I've read that have made an effect.
No, please don't open the floodgates. I'll die. I might look you up though and ask you later after I got to this.
There's another one. If you're going to read the language history, you got to read the other one, and that's The Origins of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind.
Origins of Consciousness. I think I've heard about this one.
It was written in the 70s by a guy, Julian Jaynes, who was a professor at Princeton of psychology, and he's now since died. And I happened to look it up a couple of years ago, and it turns out there's now a cult based on the book.
Spectacular. That's the kind of bullshit I like to see when I'm going to read something like that.
But the premise was, the reason I read it is because...
No, I mean, I'm kind of kidding, but I'm kind of not.
No. The reason
I'm resistant to cults.
No, the reason I read it is because I read the review of it in the New York Times in 70-something or other, and the reviewer said, "You'll probably argue with everything on every single page, but it's a fascinating book." So I said, this is a book for me.
What if every single premise you had is wrong? Where could you go with that? Well, pretty much anywhere, right?
So anyway, his point was...
like L. Ron Hubbard, sorry,
right.
Scientologist.
So his point was that consciousness is something that occurred spontaneously with a evolution of brain function, but not of biology.
Yeah.
No structure. So what happened is the corpus callosum, which connects the two halves of your brain, was unused up until about 5,000 years ago. It was unused. And then all of a sudden, mercantile interactions between separated clans on the earth caused one language and another language to come into conflict. And now, people thinking with their right brain of angels and gods were confronted with other people thinking with their right brain of angels and gods, but their left brain was using language to communicate. So now...
you think there's a carrier way?
So the
they think there's a carrier way.
So the Mesopotamian says to the South Indian, I have some frankincense that I want to sell you. And the South Indian says, I have some cloves that I will trade you. But how do they say that?
Right.
They need language to do that. And so he looks through historical texts. If you look through the Jewish Bible, which you know is the Old Testament, if you look through the Jewish Bible, all of the books, except for one, are written in terms of the voice of God interacting with humans.
Right.
There's one book in which...
Because sometimes it's the quickest, cheapest way to form archetypes.
There's one book in which God is the subject, is the recipient of the message, the book of Job.
Okay.
Job argues with God. Job is the one that's speaking, not God.
Right.
That's the last book of the Bible to be written.
Right.
That occurred after the corpus callosum was now in use between the Israelites and the rest of the world. The other part of it is the Odyssey and the Iliad.
Right.
In the Odyssey, and the Greek tragedies, the gods are in control of everything, right? Odysseus is wandering around doing this, that, and the other thing. The Iliad is the story of men, and he quotes two lines from the closing books of one of the closing books of the Odyssey, and it's almost in gibberish. The Greek. It's got a sing-song quality to it. I don't know the ancient Greek, but it's got a sing-song quality to it. And below that, he quotes phrases from a woman speaking in tongues in South Carolina.
Really?
Almost exactly the same.
Interesting.
Your right brain.
So, I can actually add to this. Do you want me to add to it, or you want to own that? So, I think that So I follow this thing, which is actually now officially defunct as of today, which is very, very sad because I'm bummed about this. There was this project dumbly named the WebBot project from a guy, Cliff High, and he used to work for Microsoft, and he made this thing where he thought, I don't understand why people are making linguistic shifts, right? We have a language set of 100,000 words, and we're using 10,000 at any time, and it shifts with no apparent logic, very much in the same kind of thinking with this. And he's like, what if those shifts are actually predicting the future? And he said the premise was being psychic, but I think the premise is actually that we're actually acting as a giant background supercomputer, and we're subconsciously communicating with each other at two levels, that we're all doing tiered steganography all the time. At one level, I'm talking to you, and we're talking about practical things and using our rational minds to share ideas with each other. At another, the choices of words that we're picking are actually sending signals back and forth, and I'm sending you the results of my process job, and you're sending me the results of your process job through linguistic shifts.
I don't think it's so as subliminal as you think.
Right. Well, maybe not. Maybe.
Right.
I think our subconscious and our conscious is the same thing.
Right.
It's all one big blob. It's not. There's no line there. And actually, reason is putting together our logical waking minds and the messages from our subconscious. And whenever you have an insight, you're like, oh, I know how to do this.
Right.
And you have no idea where it came from. That's your subconscious at work.
Sure, because language is not just the words.
Right.
And when I was in the Society for Physics Students as an undergraduate, this Chinese student came in and asked me, what is up? And I said, oh, this must be a physics question. He said, what do you mean?
What's wrong with the Earth's gravitational pull?
He said, yeah. I said, what? And he said, what is up? And I said, what? Oh, no, it's what's up. Not what is up. What's up?
What is up, Captain?
Right. He's asking me what's up.
Right. It's just funny because it's the same barrier.
Right. And I had no idea what he was asking me. It took 3 times.
Right.
I said, oh, what's up? What's up?
Right. Yeah, okay. It's funny that you got it though, right? I guess something.
No, because again, there was his body language and his expression was telling me he was
not
the
fat pipe from looking in his face.
Right, he was not asking me a question.
Why do you not understand the words that I'm using?
Right, he was not asking me a literal question.
Right.
So yeah, it's right, and similar to jokes, right? Jokes don't translate. Mm-hmm. So it's
as the entire internet is testament to. Right. Hey, Steve, I think you were waiting to tell us something. Oh, did you give up?
I was just on Google Translate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So I think that we're probably gonna kill our viewers if they watch anything else. Okay. But I'd love to have you back on. This is really great. And also, we're 2 hours and 40 minutes in.
Oh, great. Okay.
So it's kind of a good spot. Is there anything else you'd like to mention, or any?
A zillion things, but we'll save it for another time.
Sure. I mean, I'm fine, but No.
I mean we have
getting late.
Another bunch of hours.
We pretty much at 3 hours. I have to let these guys off the hook.
Right.
Because I mean, come on, who wants to hear me for 3 hours?
But some people might. I don't know.
Yeah, it's fascinating conversation.
Mother, right?
Yeah. She's gone, so there's no one.
I have a zillion things I could talk about, but
I won't do that bit again. Sorry, folks.
Yeah, but most of my interests are not actually in engineering and doing all this stuff. It's basically a means of getting the company going.
Right.
So it was all that was about. Most working at Brookhaven was more like paradise. It's
right. An opportunity to just do raw science
well, not really raw science, but you could stare out the window and come up with stuff to do, as opposed to as well as your job.
Right.
So it was that was different. And,
that's the dream, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope you get to the point with this company where you're helping people and making lots of money and living the dream.
We'll see. We'll see. Right. From your mouth to God's ear.
Yeah, I think the product looks great, and actually I have a lot of confidence from what we talked about.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we're certainly hopeful, but it's a matter of getting them into the hands of the people that buy them.
Right.
All right, great.
Great, thanks so much for being on. It has been a pleasure.
My pleasure.
And I think we're going to be talking more.
Okay, great.
All right. Thanks a lot, folks.
All right, bye-bye.
Night.